The auction hammer slammed down so hard it echoed through the freezing warehouse. Sold. $1,000. A few scattered laughs followed. Not applause. Not admiration. Just the quiet kind of laughter rich people made when they thought someone poor had made a terrible mistake. Ethan Carter stood near the back of the room in his worn brown jacket, staring at the woman who had just sold him the collapsing garage everyone else in Detroit wanted demolished. Claire Monroe didn't smile. She barely even looked at him. Tall, elegant, emotionally untouchable, the billionaire CEO stood beneath the fluorescent auction lights like she belonged somewhere cleaner than this old industrial building. Her black coat looked expensive enough to feed Ethan and his daughter for months. Maybe longer. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter," she said flatly. "You're now the owner of Monroe Property Asset Number 17. One of the executives beside her snorted. Asset number 17. Not a garage. Not a building. Not a dream. Just another dead property she wanted erased from her company records. Ethan slowly signed the final page. His hands were rough from years of mechanic work. Oil stains still sat permanently inside the cracks of his skin, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. Claire noticed. For the first time, her eyes actually focused on him. Not long. Just enough to silently judge him. Single father. Working class mechanic. Cheap truck outside. Probably drowning in debt. Definitely not someone billionaires usually remembered. "You understand the liability transfer?" she asked. "Yes." "The property is condemned." "I know. The structure is unsafe." "I read the papers. There may be environmental damage." Ethan looked up calmly. "Then I'll fix it." That earned another laugh from one of the executives. Claire didn't laugh this time. She just studied him. Like she couldn't understand how someone standing this close to financial ruin could still sound confident. "You have until Monday to clear the property," she said. "After that, Monroe Holdings assumes no responsibility whatsoever." Ethan folded the paperwork carefully. "One question." Claire checked her watch. "What?" "Why sell it this cheap?" "Because nobody else wanted it." Simple answer. Cold answer. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. Like she'd been trying to convince herself of that for a while. Outside, snow drifted slowly across the Detroit streets. Ethan stepped into the freezing wind, clutching the property folder against his chest. $1,000. Almost every cent he had left. His phone buzzed immediately. Amy. His sister. He already knew what she was going to say before answering. "Please tell me you didn't buy that building." Ethan sighed. "How did you even know?" "Because you're predictable." "I bought it." A long silence followed. Then, "Oh my God, Ethan, it's not that bad. You bought a condemned garage with money you do not have? It's fixable." "That's exactly what you said about your truck." "And I fixed the truck." After 6 months and 3 transmission failures. Ethan smiled faintly despite himself. Snow collected across the shoulders of his jacket as he walked toward his old pickup truck. "I'll figure it out." That sentence is going to kill me someday. "I'm fine." "No," Amy said softly. "You're not." That one hit harder, because she wasn't wrong. Ever since Emma died 2 years ago, Ethan had spent most days existing instead of living. Wake up, work, pay bills, pretend he wasn't falling apart, take care of Lily, sleep, repeat. Nothing felt alive anymore. Not after losing his wife. Not after hospitals, funeral bills, silence. The crushing silence afterward. "How's Lily?" he asked quietly. "She's okay. She made you a drawing." That made his chest tighten instantly. "She's still awake?" "She's trying to stay awake." "I'll be there soon." Amy hesitated. Then softer. "Ethan." "Yeah. You don't have to save every broken thing you find." He looked back toward the auction warehouse. toward Claire Monroe disappearing into a black luxury SUV surrounded by executives and bodyguards. Then toward the property papers in his hands. Maybe Amy was right. Maybe this was another terrible decision. Maybe grief had rewired his brain into constantly trying to rebuild things because he couldn't rebuild the one person he actually wanted back. But deep inside something about that garage felt different. "I'll see you soon," he said quietly before hanging up. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he climbed into the truck. The heater barely worked. The passenger door rattled whenever the engine idled. But it started. That alone felt like a miracle lately. The garage sat near the old industrial district on the edge of Detroit. Half the buildings nearby looked abandoned. The other half looked one winter away from collapsing completely. When Ethan finally pulled up beside the property, evening shadows stretched across the cracked asphalt. The garage looked worse in person. Much worse. Broken windows. Rust, covered metal siding. Graffiti sprayed across the walls. The roof sagged badly near the center. A chain link fence leaned sideways around the lot like it had simply given up perfect. Ethan stepped out slowly. Cold wind carried the smell of snow and rust through the empty streets. For a moment, he just stood there staring at the building. Most people would see junk, failure, a money pit. But Ethan had spent his entire life around broken things. Old engines, damaged frames, people trying to hold themselves together. And sometimes ugly things just needed someone willing to look deeper. He unlocked the chain around the main garage door. The metal screamed when he pulled it upward. Dust exploded into the freezing air. Darkness waited inside. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from the truck and stepped carefully into the garage. The beam cut across concrete floors stained black from decades of oil. Old tools, collapsed shelves, rotting wood, and beneath massive dusty tarps, shapes, large shapes, low, wide. His pulse slowed, then accelerated instantly. No way. He approached the nearest tarp carefully. His fingers trembled slightly as he grabbed the edge, then pulled. Dust burst upward. Underneath sat a dark green 1967 Mustang fastback buried beneath years of neglect. Ethan froze. Every sound disappeared. He slowly stepped closer. The body was filthy. The tires flat, rust along the wheel wells. But underneath the decay, the car was beautiful. Oh my God. He moved to the next tarp, then the next. Another Mustang, a Camaro, a Chevelle, a Corvette, each one hidden beneath decades of dust and silence. And finally, in the far back corner, one last shape, lower than the others, sharper, more aggressive. Ethan pulled the tarp away slowly, then stared. A De Tomaso Pantera, even covered in rust and damage. The Italian sports car looked breathtaking, like a sleeping predator frozen in time. Ethan actually laughed, not because anything was funny, because for the first time in years, he felt something. Real excitement. Hope. He circled the cars, slowly taking photographs with his phone. VIN numbers, frames, body lines, engine bays. Most people would see impossible restoration projects. Ethan saw potential. Possibility. A future. His flashlight beam swept across the garage walls again. That's when he noticed the office upstairs. A small glass room overlooking the main floor. One light still flickered weakly inside. Weird. The building didn't even have active power. Ethan climbed the metal staircase cautiously. Each step groaned beneath his weight. The office door creaked open. Dust covered everything. Old filing cabinets. Rotting paperwork, coffee mugs fossilized by time, and sitting alone on the desk a leather journal. Ethan frowned. The cover looked surprisingly clean compared to everything else, like someone had touched it recently. He opened it carefully. Inside, handwritten words filled the pages. January 12th. Claire smiled today while we worked on the Pantera together. She was 12 years old and covered herself in grease trying to hand me the wrong wrench 3 separate times. But she laughed. God, I miss hearing that child laugh. Ethan blinked. Claire Monroe? He turned another page. If Monroe Holdings ever tears this garage down after I'm gone, then they never understood what this place truly was. This garage saved my family once. Maybe someday it'll save someone else too. Signed it, Edward Monroe. Ethan stared at the signature. Claire's grandfather, the founder of Monroe Holdings, the billionaire family patriarch. His flashlight drifted slowly around the office again. The old photographs on the wall suddenly made sense. A younger Claire smiling beside classic cars. A little girl covered in grace beside an older man, laughing. Completely different from the cold woman Ethan met today. What happened to her? Downstairs, wind rattled the garage door violently. Ethan closed the journal slowly, then looked back at the hidden cars below. A condemned garage, forgotten classics, a billionaire family secret, and somehow, for the first time since Emma died, the emptiness inside him didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. Video call. Ethan answered instantly. A tiny 7-year-old face appeared on screen wrapped in blankets. Daddy. Hey, Bug. Did you buy the broken building? And Amy's voice shouted somewhere off screen. Lily? What? Lily whispered loudly. I wanted to know. Ethan laughed softly. Yeah, I bought it. Is it scary? Little? Good. Scary things are usually magic in movies. That nearly broke him. Children said things so simply sometimes, as if hope was the easiest thing in the world. Lily yawned. Can I see it? Ethan turned the camera carefully toward the hidden cars below. Her tiny eyes widened immediately. WHOA? Yeah. Air those race cars. Some of them. Can we fix them? Ethan looked down at the Pantera sitting silently beneath layers of dust. Then toward the journal in his hands. Then toward the snow falling outside. Maybe this garage wasn't just another broken thing. Maybe this was the first step toward rebuilding himself too. Yeah, Bug, he whispered. I think we can. The garage smelled like dust, rust, and old memories. Ethan Carter stood in the center of the massive building early the next morning, staring at the hidden classic cars while weak winter sunlight slipped through the broken windows overhead. The place looked less magical in daylight. More real. More damaged. The Mustang's paint had almost completely faded. The Camaro's tires were split open from age. The Corvette's interior looked like animals had been living inside it for years. And the Pantera looked like something beautiful that had nearly died waiting for someone to remember it existed. Ethan slowly walked toward it again. Even after finding it last night, part of him still couldn't believe it was real. He brushed dust carefully from the cracked windshield. Underneath decades of grime, the deep lines of the Italian bodywork slowly emerged. Beautiful. Aggressive. Forgotten. Daddy. Ethan turned. Lily stood near the garage entrance bundled inside a pink winter coat nearly too big for her. Snowflakes clung to her knitted hat while Amy stood behind her carrying 2 coffees. You brought her here already? Ethan asked. Amy handed him 1 coffee. She threatened emotional violence if I didn't. Lily marched directly toward the Pantera with enormous eyes. Oh wow. Ethan smiled faintly, careful around the sharp parts. She nodded seriously before placing tiny gloved hands against the dusty car door. It looks sad. That caught him off guard. Sad. Like nobody loved it for a long time. Amy looked around the freezing garage nervously. This place is horrifying. It's not that bad. There's literally a hole in the roof. Adds character. There's black mold on the walls, Ethan. Vintage mold. Amy stared at him. You are absolutely losing your mind. Lily ignored both of them completely. Can we fix this one first? Tid? The Pantera. She nodded immediately. It feels important. Children noticed strange things sometimes. Things adults missed. Ethan looked back toward the car, then toward the upstairs office where he'd found Edward Monroe's journal. Yeah, he said quietly. It might actually be important. Amy narrowed her eyes. What did you find here? Nothing. Nothing? That was suspiciously fast. Ethan sighed. I found a journal. What kind of journal? Claire Monroe's grandfather owned this garage. Amy blinked. What? He restored cars here. The Billionaire family, apparently. Amy looked around the building again with entirely new suspicion. Okay, that's weird. It gets weirder. Ethan explained everything. The journal. The photos. Young Claire working beside her grandfather. The emotional way Edward Monroe described the garage. Amy listened quietly while Lily climbed carefully into the dusty driver's seat of the Pantera pretending to steer. That woman yesterday. Amy said slowly. The CEO?
Yeah.
She looked emotionally dead. Ethan glanced toward the office upstairs again. Maybe she wasn't always like that. For a moment, silence settled across the garage. Cold wind rattled loose metal somewhere overhead. Then Lily gasped dramatically. There's a spider. Amy nearly spilled her coffee. New HRE. Lily pointed toward a tiny spiderweb in the corner. Amy immediately backed away. Oh, absolutely not. Ethan laughed for the first time in days. A real laugh, not forced, not polite, real. And hearing it surprised even him. Amy noticed too. Her expression softened immediately. There you are. Ethan frowned slightly. What? That sound. What sound? You laughing. The smile slowly faded from his face. Because she was right. He hadn't done much of that lately. Not since Emma. Amy walked closer carefully. You know, she said softly. I think this place might actually be good for you. Yesterday you called it a tetanus factory. It still is. But you look alive standing here. That hit harder than she probably intended. Because Ethan knew exactly what she meant. For 2 years he'd moved through life like someone carrying invisible weight chained around his chest. Everything felt muted after losing Emma. Food, music, time. Even happiness felt temporary now. Like something dangerous. But standing inside this garage, surrounded by forgotten things waiting to be rebuilt, for the first time in forever, he felt purpose again. And purpose was dangerously close to hope. Lily suddenly climbed out of the Pantera excitedly. What if we make this place beautiful again? Amy smiled sadly. Your daughter got your dangerous optimism. Ethan looked around slowly. The cracked concrete, the rust, the leaking roof, the impossible amount of work waiting ahead, then toward the hidden cars sleeping beneath dust and silence. Maybe beautiful things start ugly sometimes. Amy stared at him. That sounded disturbingly profound for a man who once superglued his truck mirror back on. It worked. For 2 hours. Still, even she smiled a little after that. By afternoon, Ethan officially started cleaning, and immediately regretted everything. Dust coated every surface. Mouse nests filled several cars. Old engine oil had hardened across the floors like black tar. The garage looked less like a restoration shop and more like something abandoned after the apocalypse. Lily insisted on helping anyway, mostly by handing him random tools and asking 100 questions every 10 minutes. What does this do? That's a wrench. What does T-ice do? That's also a wrench. What about that thing? Honestly, I have no idea. She giggled loudly. The sound echoed beautifully through the massive garage. Ethan realized something then. This building hadn't heard laughter in years, maybe decades. And somehow, that mattered. Hours passed. Snow continued falling outside while Ethan slowly uncovered more of the garage's secrets. Old photographs, toolboxes, restoration notes, stacks of invoices dating back almost 30 years, and more journal entries from Edward Monroe. One entry stopped Ethan completely. October 3rd, Claire stopped speaking after her parents died. But today she smiled while helping me rebuild the Mustang engine. This garage reaches people when words can't. Maybe machines are easier to fix than hearts. But sometimes fixing one helps fix the other. Ethan stared at the words silently. Claire lost her parents. Nobody mentioned that yesterday. The woman he met looked composed enough to survive anything. Cold enough to freeze entire rooms. But maybe people weren't born emotionally unreachable. Maybe life turned them that way. His phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. Ethan answered carefully. Hello? Mr. Carter. The Claire Monroe. Her voice remained calm and professional. But hearing it inside the garage felt strangely different now. Yeah. I need to inspect the property this afternoon. Ethan frowned. You sold it. There are still Monroe Holdings documents stored on site. You forgot your own paperwork. A slight pause. Then, yes. Something about her tone made Ethan suspect she was lying. You can come by. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line disconnected immediately. Lily looked up. Who was that? The scary rich lady. Ooh. Accurate. Amy narrowed her eyes. She's coming here? Apparently. Amy looked around the disaster zone. This place looks like raccoons lost a war inside it. Very encouraging. Just saying. A 20 went. 5 minutes later, a black luxury SUV rolled slowly into the lot. Claire Monroe stepped out wearing another immaculate dark coat despite the snowstorm. Even the way she walked looked expensive. Controlled. Perfect posture. Perfect appearance. Like she spent yearning herself never to look vulnerable. Ethan noticed something else this time, though. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying invisible pressure every second of every day. Claire stopped cold when she saw Lily sitting inside the Camaro pretending to drive. For a brief second, her expression softened. Completely. Then immediately disappeared. Mr. Carter. Ms. Monroe. Lily waved enthusiastically. Hi, scary rich lady. Amy covered her face instantly. Oh my God? Ethan nearly choked trying not to laugh. Claire blinked once. Then unexpectedly, very unexpectedly, a tiny smile appeared. Small, quick, but real. Hello, she told Lily. Lily pointed dramatically toward the Pantera. We're saving the sad cars. The Claire's eyes moved toward the uncovered vehicles, then froze. Ethan watched the exact moment recognition hit her. The Mustang, the Pantera, the old workshop, the memories. Her entire body went still. You found them. Not cold anymore. Not professional. Quiet. Almost emotional. You knew they were here, Ethan said carefully. Claire slowly walked toward the Pantera without answering. Her gloved fingers touched the dusty hood gently, like she was touching a ghost. My grandfather loved this car. Ethan stayed silent. Claire looked around the garage slowly. Every hidden vehicle. Every forgotten tool. Every memory buried beneath dust. I used to come here when I was little, she admitted softly. Lily climbed out of the Camaro immediately. Did you help fix cars too? The Claire looked at her. Then strangely, actually answered honestly. Yes. What happened? That question landed hard. Claire's face changed instantly. Walls went back up. Expression neutral again. Life happened. Lily frowned thoughtfully. That sounds sad. Amy mouthed an apology from behind her daughter, but Claire surprised everyone again. She crouched slightly to Lily's height. What's your name? Lily. That's a pretty name. My mommy picked it. Silence. Heavy silence. Ethan's chest tightened immediately. Lily continued innocently. She's in heaven now. Claire froze. Completely froze. And for the first time since meeting her, Ethan saw genuine emotion crack through her perfect composure. Pain recognized pain. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. But it was there. I'm sorry, Claire said quietly. Ethan nodded once. Thanks. The snow drifted softly outside while silence filled the garage. Then Claire noticed the journal sitting on the workbench. Her expression immediately sharpened. Where did you find that? Upstairs office. She stepped toward it quickly. Almost too quickly. Ethan watched her carefully now. Claire picked up the journal gently. Her fingers trembled slightly. He kept these? You didn't know. Knew. She opened several pages slowly, then stopped. A photograph slipped free. Young Claire sitting beside Edward Monroe while holding a wrench twice too large for her hands. Both smiling, both covered in grace, completely happy. Lily looked amazed. That's you. Claire stared silently at the photograph, then nodded once. You looked happier before. Amy closed her eyes immediately. Lily. But Claire didn't seem angry, just surprised. Like nobody had spoken to her honestly in a very long time. I was. She admitted quietly. That silence again. The dangerous kind. The kind filled with things people usually avoid saying out loud. Finally, Claire carefully closed the journal. You can keep the cars. Ethan frowned. I wasn't asking permission. No, she said softly. You weren't tied. Their eyes met briefly. Something strange passed between them. Not romance. Not yet. Recognition maybe. Two broken people noticing each other for the first time. Claire stepped backwards slowly. I should go. Then Lily spoke again. Will you come back? Claire looked startled by the question. Why? Because sad people shouldn't be alone all the time. Absolute silence. Even Amy looked emotional now. Claire stared at Lily for several long seconds. Then finally, maybe. She turned quickly afterward and walked toward the SUV before anyone could say anything else. But right before getting inside, she looked back at the garage one final time. Not at Ethan, at the building, at the cars, at the memories she thought were buried forever. Then she drove away into the falling snow. Amy exhaled loudly. Well, what? I think your daughter just emotionally assassinated a billionaire. Lily smiled proudly. Can we keep her? Ethan laughed again. And upstairs, inside the abandoned office, one page of Edward Monroe's journal remained open beneath the weak afternoon light. Some places are more than buildings. Some places remember people after the world forgets them. And sometimes, the broken souls who need saving somehow find their way back there. Claire Monroe had not stopped thinking about the garage for 3 straight days. That irritated her. Because Claire Monroe did not obsess over things. She solved them. Managed them. Controlled them. That was how she survived. Yet somehow, every quiet moment during meetings, presentations, financial calls, and investor dinners, her mind kept drifting back to one freezing garage on the edge of Detroit. To dust-covered classic cars. To Edward Monroe's journal. To Ethan Carter standing in oil-stained jeans looking at broken machines like they still deserved love. And worst of all, to Lily. Sad people shouldn't be alone all the time. The words replayed in Claire's head like an accusation. M's. Monroe. The Claire blinked suddenly. The boardroom stared at her. 6 executives sat around the massive glass table waiting for an answer. Marcus Reynolds, Monroe Holdings' chief financial officer, adjusted his glasses carefully. The East District demolition proposal. Claire straightened instantly. Professional again. Controlled. Yes. Approved. Marcus nodded slowly but kept watching her. He'd worked beside Claire for 6 years. Long enough to notice when something was wrong. You seem distracted lately. I'm not. You missed 3 numbers during the quarterly report. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. I corrected them. That's not the point. The room became very quiet. Nobody challenged Claire Monroe publicly. Not if they valued their careers. But Marcus had known her before Monroe Holdings became a billion-dollar company. Before the coldness hardened permanently into her personality. He wasn't afraid of her, which sometimes annoyed her more than fear did. "I'm fine," Claire said flatly. Marcus leaned back slowly. "This about the garage." Her eyes sharpened instantly. "What garage?" "The condemned one you sold last week. That property is irrelevant now." "Then why did you personally visit it twice?" Claire said nothing. Because there was no acceptable answer. She couldn't exactly explain. "I found old memories there I thought died years ago." Marcus studied her quietly. Then softer. "You haven't visited your grandfather's old properties in years." Something painful moved briefly behind Claire's eyes. "My grandfather is dead." "Yes," Marcus replied carefully. "But grief doesn't disappear just because you ignore it professionally." Claire stood immediately. Meeting over. Emotionally dangerous territory detected. "We're done here." Nobody argued. She walked quickly through the glass hallways of Monroe Holdings Tower, heels clicking sharply against marble floors. Assistants moved aside instantly. Employees avoided eye contact. Claire inspired respect. Fear. Distance. Exactly the way she preferred it. Because distance kept people from hurting you. Her office occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Detroit beneath gray winter skies. Beautiful view. Empty office. Empty life. Claire removed her coat slowly and sat behind the massive desk. Then stared at nothing. Her phone buzzed. Another investor. Another deal. Another acquisition. Another meaningless victory. She muted it. Then opened the bottom desk drawer instead. Inside sat one photograph. The only personal item in her office. Young Claire beside Edward Monroe inside the garage. Grace on both their faces. Huge smiles. Alive. Back before death taught her that happiness could vanish instantly. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Afterward, everything changed. Edward Monroe raised her himself. And whenever the grief became unbearable, he brought her to the garage. They rebuilt engines together. Restored broken classics. Spent hours talking beside old machines while snow fell outside. That garage saved her once. At least until Edward died too. Then Monroe Holdings took over everything. Executives, lawyers, meetings, pressure, responsibility, and slowly, Claire stopped visiting the garage altogether. Because memories hurt. Because grief hurt. Because feeling anything deeply became dangerous after enough loss. So she buried herself inside work instead. Years passed. Then Ethan Carter accidentally reopened everything she spent a decade trying to lock away. Claire closed her eyes slowly. Annoyed at herself. Annoyed at him. Annoyed that some struggling mechanic with sad eyes somehow made her feel more emotionally exposed in 2 conversations than most people had in years. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an image message. Unknown sender. Claire frowned before opening it. A photograph of the Pantera. Cleaned. Partially uncovered. Sunlight reflecting softly across the deep lines of the car. Below it, a Lily says the sad race car looks happier today. Claire stared at the message for several long seconds. Then unexpectedly smiled. Tiny. Almost invisible. But real. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter stood freezing on the garage roof questioning every decision he'd ever made. "Tesh isa ter rebel eida," Amy yelled from below. Ethan hammered another loose metal sheet into place.
"You've said that 12 times already!"
"Because you are one step away from falling through the roof." Lily cupped her hands dramatically. "Don't die."
"Daddy! Excellent motivation!"
Snow crunched beneath Amy's boots as she paced below nervously. The garage looked slightly better now, slightly. They'd cleaned most of the debris, opened the windows, organized tools, dragged years of garbage into dumpsters. But the building still needed enormous repairs, especially the roof. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead despite the freezing air. The truth was, he should probably sell the cars individually. That would be the smart choice. Quick money, stable future, safer for Lily. But every time he considered it, something inside him resisted. These cars deserved restoration. The garage deserved saving. And maybe he needed something impossible right now. Something bigger than grief. Bigger than survival. His phone buzzed. Message from Claire. You missed a rusted support beam near the northwest corner. Ethan blinked. Then looked across the roof. Sure enough, a badly damaged support beam sat half, hidden beneath snow. He stared at his phone suspiciously. How does she know that? Another message arrived immediately. My grandfather repaired that section twice. Ethan smiled slightly before typing back. You spying on my garage now? Several minutes passed. Then finally no, a pause. Then, maybe a little. Ethan laughed softly. Amy noticed immediately. What? Nothing. You smiled at your phone. No, I didn't. You absolutely did. Ethan ignored her and climbed carefully back down. Lily immediately grabbed his sleeve excitedly. Can we clean the scary office today? The upstairs office. She nodded dramatically. There might be treasure. Amy crossed her arms. There's definitely mold. But Lily already sprinted upstairs anyway. Ethan followed, laughing. The office looked different now after cleaning. Less abandoned. More frozen in time. Stacks of restoration sketches covered one wall. Old photographs sat scattered across the desk. And Edward Monroe's journals filled an entire filing cabinet. Lily carefully opened one, then gasped. There's a lady in this one. Ethan walked over. Inside rested another photograph of young Claire Monroe. Maybe 16 years old now, standing beside a partially restored Mustang. Still smiling, but less freely, as if adulthood had already started hardening her. She looks lonely, Lily whispered. Ethan stared at the photo quietly. Yeah, she probably needs friends. That woman runs a billion-dollar company. So, children made complicated things sound embarrassingly simple sometimes. Amy opened another journal nearby, then slowly frowned. Ethan. You should read this. He took the journal carefully. The page was dated 11 years earlier. Claire refuses to sell the garage even though the board keeps pressuring her. She says this place matters. That maybe someday she'll restore the Pantera herself. I hope life stays gentle enough for her to remember who she is here. Ethan stared at the words. Claire fought to keep the garage. Then why sell it now? Something didn't add up. Downstairs, tires suddenly crunched across snow outside. All three looked toward the window. Black SUV, Claire. Again. Amy burst out laughing immediately. Oh my God. What? She's absolutely emotionally attached to this place. Ethan frowned. She said she was picking up more documents. She's lying. Probably. The Claire entered the garage moments later wearing another elegant winter coat. But this time, she didn't look like a billionaire inspecting property. She looked like someone visiting a grave. Her eyes moved slowly across the clean floors. The uncovered cars. The repaired roof sections. The organized tools. You've done a lot already, she admitted quietly, trying. The Claire walked toward the Mustang slowly, then touched the hood gently. My grandfather rebuilt this engine 3 times. Why? Kept intentionally improving it. A tiny smile appeared briefly. He said perfection was impossible, but chasing it made people better. Ethan leaned against the workbench watching her carefully. You miss him. Claire's expression immediately closed again. That's not your business. Fair enough. Still, he noticed she didn't deny it. Lily suddenly appeared upstairs yelling dramatically. Claire, Claire visibly startled. Lily sprinted down the stairs holding a journal. We found your picture, Amy whispered to Ethan. She's terrifyingly fearless. The Claire looked genuinely caught off guard. You were reading those. They're cool. Lily opened the journal excitedly. Look. Claire stared at the old photograph silently. Then looked away quickly, like it physically hurt. You looked happy. Lily continued innocently. Claire swallowed once. My grandfather took that after we rebuilt the Mustang. Why'd you stop? Silence again. Heavy, dangerous. Finally, Claire answered honestly. Because after he died, coming here hurt too much. That truth changed the room instantly. Because suddenly Ethan understood everything. The coldness. The emotional walls. The obsession with work. Claire Monroe wasn't heartless. She was grieving. Still, even after all these years, Ethan knew exactly what that felt like. Lily walked closer carefully, then hugged Claire unexpectedly. Everyone froze, especially Claire. The billionaire CEO stood completely motionless while a tiny 7-year-old hugged her around the waist. For one terrifying second, Ethan worried Claire might panic. Instead, something unbelievable happened. Claire slowly hugged her back. Very gently, like she'd forgotten how. Amy looked emotional immediately. Ethan looked away slightly. Because witnessing tenderness from someone who spent years emotionally frozen felt strangely intimate. Lily pulled back, smiling proudly. There. Claire blinked. There what? You looked sad again. Claire stared at her speechless. Nobody talked to her like this. Nobody treated her like a person instead of a CEO. And honestly, it clearly shattered her defenses in ways billion-dollar negotiations never could. Her phone suddenly rang loudly. Claire stepped back immediately. Walls returning. Distance returning. She answered sharply. Yes. A pause. Then her expression darkened instantly. No. Another pause. I said no. Silence. Then colder. Because the property is sold, Marcus. Ethan exchanged a look with Amy. Marcus, the CFO. Claire listened another moment before hanging up aggressively. What happened? Ethan asked carefully. Claire hesitated. Then sighed softly. The Monroe Holdings board wants the garage back. Silence. What? They discovered the classic cars were still inside. Amy cursed quietly under her breath. They can't do that. Ethan said immediately. The contract's finalized. They're claiming non-disclosure issues. They sold me the property as is. I know. The Claire looked genuinely frustrated now. Legally, you're probably protected. But if the board decides to fight this in court, they can make your life very difficult. Lily frowned. They can't take the sad cars. Claire looked down at her. No, she said quietly. They can't. Something shifted then. Subtle, but important. For the first time, Claire Monroe stopped sounding like the enemy and started sounding like someone trying to protect the garage too. Ethan noticed it immediately. So did Amy. Claire looked around the building slowly one more time, then toward Edward Monroe's journals upstairs, then toward the Pantera. Then finally toward Ethan. I think my grandfather wanted you to find this place. Ethan blinked slightly. That's oddly specific. He believed broken things found the people who needed them. Outside, snow continued falling softly across Detroit. Inside the garage. For the first time in years, Claire Monroe almost felt warm again. And that terrified her more than anything else. Detroit woke beneath freezing rain. Gray skies pressed heavily over the city while water slid slowly down the cracked windows of the garage. Inside, Ethan Carter sat alone upstairs in Edward Monroe's office reading journal entries by flashlight while the storm rattled the old building around him. He should have been sleeping. Instead, he kept reading, because the journals no longer felt like restoration notes. They felt like pieces of a family buried inside the walls of the garage. And somehow, the deeper Ethan looked into Claire Monroe's past, the more he understood the sadness hiding behind her perfect composure. Below him, the garage remained quiet. Lily had fallen asleep hours earlier on a pile of moving blankets beside the Camaro after insisting she was helping emotionally. Amy finally carried her home around midnight. But Ethan stayed. Rain tapped softly against the upstairs windows while he turned another page. May 19th. Claire cried today after school. Not because she failed, because another girl called her cold. Funny how children recognize loneliness faster than adults do. I tried teaching her carburetors afterward. By the end of the night, she was laughing again. Machines make sense to her. People hurt her. Ethan stared at the words for a long moment. That explained too much. He continued reading. August 2nd. Claire says she wants to turn Monroe Holdings into the biggest company in Detroit someday. I asked why. She said, so nobody can ever take anything from me again. God help me. That child is building armor instead of a life. Ethan slowly leaned back in the old chair. He understood that feeling better than he wanted to. After Emma died, he'd done the same thing. Not with money, not with power, but with emotional distance. Because grief changed people. It turned survival into habit, and habits slowly became personality. Downstairs, thunder rumbled softly through the garage. Ethan closed the journal carefully. Then noticed something strange. One drawer in Edward Monroe's desk remained locked. Old brass keyhole. No key. Naturally, that immediately became suspicious. Ethan crouched beside it. Tried pulling harder. Nothing. Okay. He looked around the office. Then toward the cluttered shelves nearby. If there was one thing Ethan learned working around old mechanics, nobody ever truly hid keys well. 10 minutes later, he found it taped beneath a dusty coffee mug, of course. He inserted the tiny brass key slowly. The drawer clicked open. Inside rested dozens of old photographs, letters, and one sealed envelope labeled FRCLAIR. Ethan immediately stopped. This felt private, very private. He shouldn't open it. Absolutely shouldn't. Which was exactly when the downstairs garage door suddenly screamed open in the storm below. Ethan nearly jumped. Footsteps echoed through the garage. Then Claire's voice drifted upward. Mr. Carter. Ethan blinked. At 1 a.m, he quickly placed the envelope back inside the drawer before heading downstairs. Claire stood near the entrance, dripping rainwater across the concrete floor. No luxury coat tonight. No corporate perfection. Just black jeans, boots, and a dark sweater beneath a soaked jacket. She looked exhausted. Human. Beautiful in a dangerously real way. What are you doing here? Ethan asked carefully. Claire looked around the garage quietly. I couldn't sleep. That honesty surprised both of them. Rain hammered the roof overhead. The storm made the garage feel strangely isolated from the rest of the world. Ethan noticed her eyes drifting toward the Pantera immediately. She always looked better in the rain. Claire whispered. Ethan frowned slightly. You called the car she? My grandfather did. Claire walked slowly toward it. He used to say certain cars had personalities. He wasn't wrong. A tiny smile touched her lips briefly, then disappeared. Claire looked around the cleaned garage. You've changed the place already? Trying to? You work obsessively. So do you. That landed. Claire crossed her arms slightly. That's different. How? I built an empire. Ethan looked around the garage. I'm trying to rebuild one. Silence. Not awkward. Just honest. Claire slowly approached the workbench, then noticed the open journal upstairs through the office window. You're still reading them. They explain things. Claire looked away immediately. What things? You. The word settled heavily between them. Claire's defenses returned instantly. You don't know me? No, Ethan admitted quietly. But I think your grandfather did. A rain continued crashing against the building. Finally, Claire sighed softly. He loved this place more than Monroe Holdings. Why? Because it was the only place he was happy after my grandmother died. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. Another grief story. Another person rebidding themselves through broken things. Claire sat slowly on the edge of the old workbench. And for the first time, she stopped acting like a CEO. When my parents died, she said quietly, everyone expected me to become strong immediately. Ethan stayed silent. My grandfather was the only person who let me fall apart. Her voice remained calm. But Ethan could hear the pain underneath it. He'd bring me here after funerals, meeting school disasters, panic attacks. She looked around slowly. This garage became the only place in the world where nobody expected anything from me. Ethan understood immediately. Because after Emma died, the only place he could breathe properly again was underneath broken engines too. Then why sell it? He asked softly. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. Because keeping it hurt. That answer shattered something invisible between them. Because suddenly Ethan realized Claire. Monroe wasn't cold because she lacked emotion. She was cold because she felt too much. And somewhere along the way, she learned shutting down was easier than grieving forever. Thunder rolled overhead again. Claire suddenly looked upstairs toward the office. There's something else in those journals. Ethan froze slightly. What? My grandfather hid things. What kind of things? He believed memories should be earned. That sounded exactly like something an old mechanic would say. Claire stood slowly, then headed upstairs. Ethan followed. The office felt smaller somehow with both of them inside. Closer. More personal. Claire walked directly toward the locked drawer Ethan had opened earlier. You found it. I didn't read anything. She gave him a look. You absolutely considered it. Maybe slightly. Shockingly, Claire laughed. Tiny, soft, but real. The sound completely transformed her, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Even Claire herself looked surprised afterward. I haven't heard myself laugh in a while, she admitted quietly. Ethan leaned against the desk. It sounds good on you. That silence again. The dangerous kind. Claire carefully removed the envelope labeled FORCLAIR. Her fingers hesitated slightly before opening it. Inside rested a handwritten letter. And another photograph. Claire stared at the photo first, then suddenly sat down hard in the chair. Ethan immediately noticed tears filling her eyes. What is it? She handed him the photograph silently. Young Claire, maybe 17. Standing beside Edward Monroe and another man Ethan didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, grease-covered, laughing beside the Pantera. On the back, the three idiots who almost blew up the garage rebuilding Italian wiring. Summer. Best night of my life. Claire. Ethan looked carefully between the photo and Claire. You loved him. Claire looked away instantly. Yes. Past tense. Sharp. Painful. What happened? The Claire stared at Edward Monroe's letter silently for several seconds before answering. He died. The storm outside suddenly sounded louder. He worked here with my grandfather for years. Claire whispered. Mechanic. Dreamer. Impossible optimist. Her mouth trembled slightly. He was driving home from the garage one night during a snowstorm. Ethan already knew where this was going. He never made it home. Silence swallowed the room. Because grief recognized grief instantly. And Ethan suddenly understood why Claire emotionally detached from the entire world afterward. This garage didn't just remind her of happiness. It reminded her of loss. Of love buried beneath unfinished dreams. Claire slowly opened Edward Monroe's letter. Then read aloud quietly. Claire, if you're reading this, then I'm gone too. And knowing you, that probably means you've spent years trying not to feel anything anymore. I understand. Lost is that to people. But sweetheart, this garage was never meant to become a tomb. It was meant to become proof. Proof that broken things can become beautiful again. You taught me that. And someday, someone will walk into this building carrying grief heavy enough to crush them. When that happens, let the garage save them the same way it saved us. Love always. Grandpa Claire stopped reading halfway through. because tears were already falling silently down her face. Ethan looked away respectfully, giving her space. But Claire suddenly laughed weakly through the tears. He always wrote like some emotionally manipulative wizard. Ethan smiled softly. He sounds wise. He was annoying. You miss him. Every day. That honesty changed everything. Because now the emotional walls between them felt thinner. Human. Real. Claire wiped her eyes quickly. Embarrassed. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for grieving. Another dangerous silence. The kind that pulled people closer without permission. Then downstairs, the garage light suddenly flickered. Once. Twice. Then died completely. Darkness swallowed everything instantly. Claire startled slightly. What happened? Thunder exploded overhead. Then rain started pouring through part of the damaged roof downstairs. Damn it. Ethan grabbed a flashlight quickly. Water splashed across the concrete below near the Mustang. We need buckets. The Claire stared at him. You're smiling. Ethan blinked. Am I? Wes. Sorry. No. Claire whispered softly, while watching him climb downstairs through the flashlight glow. You're alive. That stopped him completely. Because nobody had said it that way before. Not accurately. Not honestly. Ethan slowly looked back toward her standing in darkness beneath the weak flashlight beam. Beautiful. Sad. Rainstorm outside. Old garage. Two grieving people surrounded by broken things trying to survive. And somehow, for the first time in years, neither of them felt entirely alone anymore. The garage slowly became alive again. Not all at once, not magically, but little by little, like a heartbeat returning after years of silence. Morning sunlight started reflecting across cleaned concrete floors instead of dust. Music began echoing softly through the workshop while Ethan worked. The smell of rust slowly mixed with fresh coffee and paint thinner and warm engine oil. And somehow, people started smiling there again. Especially Claire Monroe. Which terrified her. 3 weeks after the storm, Claire stood frozen outside the garage entrance gripping a paper coffee cup, while snow melted quietly along the streets of Detroit. She had no business being here this often. That was what she kept telling herself anyway. Yet somehow, every evening after Monroe Holdings meetings ended, her car drifted back toward the industrial district almost automatically. Toward the garage. Toward Ethan. Toward warmth she no longer understood how to live without. Inside, sparks exploded softly from beneath the Mustang, while Ethan welded replacement metal into the frame. Classic rock music played somewhere nearby. Lily sat on the floor drawing pictures of the cars, while humming quietly to herself. The entire scene looked painfully normal, peaceful, and Claire realized with sudden uncomfortable clarity. She envied it. Not the garage. Not the cars. The feeling. The warmth between them. The life. Ethan noticed her standing outside immediately. You're staring again. The Claire blinked slightly. I'm not. You absolutely are. Lily gasped dramatically. Miss Claire. She sprinted toward her instantly. Claire barely had time to react before tiny arms wrapped around her waist again. Something inside Claire melted every single time this child hugged her. It felt dangerous, like standing too close to sunlight after years in darkness. You came back, Lily said proudly. Claire carefully handed her the coffee. I brought hot chocolate. Lily's eyes widened like Christmas arrived early. You're my favorite billionaire. Ethan laughed loudly from beneath the Mustang. Claire tried not to smile. Failed immediately. Amy walked out of the office upstairs carrying paperwork, then stopped dramatically. Oh no. Claire frowned slightly. What? You're smiling again. Claire instantly straightened. I am not. Amy pointed accusingly. That's twice this week. Please stop tracking my emotional expressions. Never. Ethan climbed out from beneath the Mustang, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. Claire hated how attractive he looked doing ordinary things, which was ridiculous. He wore worn jeans, work boots, gray-stained shirts, nothing polished, nothing carefully curated, just real. And after years surrounded by perfectly manufactured corporate personalities, real had become dangerously attractive. "How's the roof?" she asked carefully. "Still standing. Impressive. Low standards help." Claire stepped further inside slowly. The garage looked dramatically different now. Lights worked properly. Most of the debris was gone. Tools hung organized across the walls, and the Pantera sat uncovered beneath soft overhead lighting like a sleeping masterpiece waiting to wake up. Edward Monroe would have cried seeing this place alive again. That thought hit Claire harder than expected. "You okay?" Ethan's voice pulled her back instantly. Claire realized she'd been staring at the garage emotionally again. "Yes. You looked sad. I always look sad." "That's fair." To her horror, Claire laughed again. God, this man was becoming a problem. Amy watched both of them carefully from upstairs with the expression of someone witnessing emotionally oblivious idiots in real time. Lily loudly whispered, "They like each other." The Claire nearly inhaled hot chocolate incorrectly. Ethan choked on air. Amy looked delighted. Children truly are the voice of chaos. "We are." Newt. Claire stopped herself immediately. Too defensive. Too fast. Which made everything infinitely worse. Lily narrowed her eyes suspiciously. That sounded guilty. Ethan pointed dramatically toward the Mustang. "Who wants to help me clean engine parts?" Lily instantly forgot everything. M.E. Crisis temporarily avoided. Claire slowly wandered toward the upstairs office afterward while Ethan and Lily worked below. The office felt warmer lately. Less haunted. More lived in. Edward Monroe's journals remained stacked across the desk beside restoration sketches and old photographs. Claire picked one up quietly, then froze reading the page already open. March 22nd. Claire spent all afternoon helping Daniel rebuild the Pantera transmission. They argued the entire time about Italian engineering, then laughed so hard she dropped a wrench into the engine bay. I haven't seen her this happy since before her parents died. Claire sat slowly in the old chair. Daniel. Even seeing his name still hurt after all these years. Because she truly loved him once. Before grief stole another person from her life. Sometimes she still remembered the phone call. The snowstorm. The police officer standing at her apartment door. And afterward, the terrifying realization that loving people meant eventually losing them. That was the moment Claire Monroe started emotionally disappearing from the world. A knock startled her slightly. Ethan stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You vanished." The Claire accepted one carefully. "Needed air?" "You came upstairs." Emotionally upstairs. That sounded fake deep. It absolutely was. They smiled slightly at each other. Dangerous again. Ethan leaned against the doorway quietly. "You loved him." Claire looked down at the coffee. "Yes. Your grandfather wrote about him a lot. He adored Daniel." "What was he like?" Claire stared out the office window toward the Pantera below. Then, surprisingly, she answered honestly. Annoyingly optimistic. Ethan laughed softly. "Sounds familiar." He believed every broken thing deserved another chance. "That definitely sounds familiar." Claire slowly smiled into her coffee. He used to spend hours talking to strangers in grocery stores. Monster. Once drove 3 hours to help an old woman fix a flat tire because she reminded him of his grandmother. Ethan blinked. 3 hours. He said lonely people shouldn't feel abandoned. That line landed heavily. Because suddenly Ethan understood why Daniel mattered so much to her. And maybe why Claire kept returning here now. This garage connected her to the last version of herself that still knew how to love openly. I stopped coming after he died, Claire admitted quietly. Why? Because everything reminded me of him. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that. Of course he did. Emma existed everywhere in his life too. Songs, restaurants, old hoodies hanging forgotten inside closets. Grief turned ordinary things into emotional landmines. Claire looked at him carefully. You still wear your wedding ring. Ethan instinctively looked down at his hand. Silver band, always there, always heavy. I forget it's there sometimes. That's a lie. He smiled sadly. Yeah. Silence settled gently around them. Not awkward anymore. Comfortable. And somehow that scared Claire more than anything else. Because comfortable led to attachment. Attachment led to loss. She learned that lesson too many times already. Downstairs, Lily suddenly yelled dramatically. "Dad!" Both rushed downstairs instantly. Lily stood near the Pantera holding something dusty and rectangular.
I found treasure!
Ethan blinked. That was under the seat. Lily nodded proudly. Claire carefully took the object. Old wooden box. Small brass latch. Edward Monroe's initials engraved across the top. Claire slowly opened it. Inside rested dozens of folded handwritten letters tied carefully with faded ribbon. And one photograph Ethan recognized immediately. Young Claire and Daniel kissing beside the unfinished Pantera. Claire inhaled sharply. What is it? Ethan asked gently. Claire carefully unfolded one letter, then froze reading the first line. To my favorite stubborn billionaire. If you're reading this, then your grandfather finally gave you the box after I'm gone. Which means he ignored my instructions for dramatic timing again. Claire laughed weakly through sudden tears. He wrote me letters. She unfolded another, and another. Dozens. Every one written for her before Daniel died. Letters for future birthdays. Future heartbreak. Future loneliness. Future versions of Claire he knew he'd never get to meet. Ethan watched silently while emotions overwhelmed her completely, and for once, Claire stopped trying to hide it. Tears slid down her face openly now.
Real.
Raw. Human. I can't do this, she whispered shakily. Yes, you can. No. Her breathing became uneven. Panic threatening. Too much emotion. Too fast. Ethan stepped closer carefully. Claire. I knew he was going to die. What? He wrote these before the accident. Fear flashed across Ethan's face. What do you mean? Claire unfolded another letter with trembling hands. If I ever leave before you do, promise me you won't turn yourself into ice afterward. That line shattered her completely, because that was exactly what she became. Cold, untouchable, emotionally frozen, like Daniel somehow predicted the future version of her perfectly. Claire covered her mouth, trying not to cry harder. Then suddenly, warm arms wrapped gently around her. Ethan. Not romantic, not possessive, just human comfort. And after years without real tenderness, Claire broke, completely. She cried against his chest while rain tapped softly against the garage windows outside. Ethan held her quietly without speaking, without fixing, without demanding anything. Just staying there. And somehow, that hurt even more, because she forgot what safety felt like. Lily looked up at Amy quietly nearby. Are adults always this emotionally complicated? Amy sighed dramatically. Unfortunately, yes. Hours later, after Lily fell asleep upstairs beneath blankets again, Claire still sat beside Ethan on the garage floor near the Pantera. The letters rested scattered between them. Some funny, some romantic, some painfully wise. One made Ethan smile softly. Claire, you pretend coffee tastes good because you think successful people are supposed to enjoy bitter things. Please stop lying to yourself. Claire groaned loudly. I never let me emotionally perform around him. A smart man. He was deeply annoying. You love that? Yeah. Ethan looked toward the Pantera quietly. You know what? I think this garage is doing exactly what your grandfather hoped it would. Claire frowned slightly. What do you mean? Ethan looked at her carefully. I think it's saving people again. That silence returned. Soft, dangerous, beautiful. And outside, snow finally stopped falling over Detroit while inside the old garage. Two grieving hearts slowly began remembering how to feel alive again. Spring arrived slowly in Detroit. Snow melted into cold rain. Rain turned into sunlight. And somehow, the garage survived long enough to see flowers blooming through cracks in the pavement outside. Ethan Carter stood beneath the open garage door one quiet morning, watching golden sunlight spill across the workshop floor while classic rock played softly through old speakers overhead. The garage no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive. The Mustang engine sat partially rebuilt beside organized tools. The Camaro gleamed beneath fresh primer. And the Pantera had become the soul of the building, waiting patiently. Like it knew something important was finally happening here again. Behind Ethan, laughter echoed loudly. Real laughter. Claire Monroe's laughter. He turned instinctively, and nearly forgot how breathing worked. Claire sat cross-legged on the concrete floor beside Lily, wearing ripped jeans and one of Ethan's oversized gray hoodies because she accidentally ruined her expensive sweater with engine grease 2 hours earlier. Her dark hair was tied messily upward, gray streaked one cheek, and she looked happy. Not polished, not controlled, not emotionally frozen, just happy. It was the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen. Lily pointed dramatically toward a pile of bolts. Those go TSHRE. The Claire frowned. They absolutely do not. I'm emotionally confident they do. That is not how engines work. Amy walked past carrying coffee and nearly dropped the tray. Oh my God. Claire looked up suspiciously. What? You're becoming a person. Rude, but accurate. Claire rolled her eyes, then accidentally smiled again. Amy looked personally victorious about it. 3 months earlier, Claire Monroe would never have sat on a concrete floor covered in grease arguing with a child about bolts. 3 months earlier, she barely remembered what peace felt like. Now somehow, the garage had become the only place where her chest didn't constantly feel tight. The only place she could breathe, which should have terrified her more than it did. Ethan walked toward them slowly. You're holding the wrench backward. The Claire narrowed her eyes immediately. I own $1 billion company, and yet somehow still losing a fight against basic tools. Lily gasped dramatically. Dad roasted you. Claire pointed accusingly. You created tiny emotional violence. Correct, Ethan said proudly. Claire laughed again. God, that sound kept wrecking him, because every time she laughed, he saw flashes of the woman she used to be before grief buried her alive, and Ethan realized something dangerous lately. He looked forward to seeing her now. Too much. Claire stood slowly while wiping grease from her hands, then noticed Ethan staring slightly too long. What? Nothing. That was absolutely something. Amy whispered loudly to Lily. They're flirting again. We can hear you, Claire and Ethan said simultaneously. Amy looked thrilled. Excellent. Lily pointed dramatically between them. You should kiss eventually. Claire nearly dropped a wrench. Ethan turned violently toward the Mustang, pretending the engine suddenly required emergency attention. Amy looked like she might actually pass out laughing. Claire crossed her arms. Children are terrifying. No argument there. But despite the embarrassment, neither of them actually denied it anymore. That was the dangerous part. Later that afternoon, Ethan and Claire worked alone beneath the Mustang while Lily napped upstairs on the office couch. Warm spring air drifted through the open garage doors, carrying distant city sounds inside. Claire handed Ethan tools while sitting beside him beneath the lifted car. You missed dinner again last night, Ethan said quietly. Claire frowned slightly. How do you know that? You looked exhausted this morning. That's disturbingly observant. You're easier to read now. That silence returned, the meaningful kind. Claire looked toward him carefully. I used to sleep in my office. Ethan stopped working. What? For almost 2 years. That's not healthy. No, she admitted softly. It wasn't. He slid out from beneath the Mustang slightly. Why? Claire stared toward the open garage doors. Because if I stayed busy enough, I didn't have to think. About Daniel. About her grandfather. About loneliness. About the terrifying emptiness waiting inside silence. Ethan understood immediately. After Emma died, he spent months taking extra mechanic shifts for the same reason. Exhaustion felt easier than grief. Claire leaned back against the workbench quietly. Do you know the strangest thing about this place? What? I sleep now. That hit him hard, because she looked healthier lately too. Softer somehow. Less haunted. The garage was healing her in ways neither of them fully understood yet. Ethan smiled slightly. That's good. Claire looked at him carefully. You're sleeping too. He blinked. How do you know? You stopped looking like you're surviving a war. He laughed softly. Fair. Their eyes held slightly too long afterward. Dangerous again. Very dangerous. Then, the garage doors slammed open violently. Marcus Reynolds stormed inside wearing an expensive suit that looked aggressively out of place among engine parts and welding equipment. Claire immediately straightened emotionally. Walls returning instantly. Marcus looked furious. We need to talk. Ethan quietly slid out from beneath the Mustang fully. This sounds unpleasant already. Marcus ignored him completely. Claire. Now. Claire stood slowly. What happened? The board discovered you've been diverting Monroe Holdings' legal resources toward protecting this property. Ethan frowned immediately. What? Claire looked annoyed. I handled it. You used company attorneys to block redevelopment contracts. Marcus lowered his voice sharply. You're risking shareholder lawsuits over a condemned garage. Claire's expression hardened instantly. It's not condemned anymore. Marcus gestured around the building. It's still a financial disaster. Ethan stood carefully now. That financial disaster belongs to me. Marcus finally looked at him directly and immediately dismissed him. You have no idea what you're involved in. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Try me. Marcus sighed heavily. This property sits directly on top of a proposed redevelopment zone worth nearly $200 million. Silence. Even Claire looked surprised he admitted that openly. Marcus continued. The board wanted the garage demolished years ago. Claire delayed it repeatedly. Ethan slowly turned toward her. You protected this place. Claire looked away slightly. I told you it mattered. Marcus looked genuinely frustrated now. She sabotaged multiple investor projects trying to preserve a memory. It's not just a memory. Claire snapped suddenly. The room froze. Because that was real emotion. Raw. Visible. Claire inhaled sharply afterward, realizing she lost composure. But it was too late. Marcus stared at her sadly now instead of angrily. You're changing. Claire looked stunned by that. Then defensive. No, I'm not. You smile here. Silence. You laugh here. More silence. You haven't looked alive in years until now. Claire said nothing. Because she couldn't. Marcus slowly looked around the garage. Then toward Ethan. And finally understood. Oh. Ethan blinked. Oh, what? Marcus rubbed his forehead tiredly. This is catastrophically complicated. Claire looked horrified. It is not. It absolutely is. Amy walked downstairs at the perfect worst possible moment carrying snacks. Uro emotional tension. Marcus looked exhausted immediately. Who are these people? We'll live here emotionally now, Amy explained proudly. Lily suddenly appeared behind her. Miss Claire likes Dad. A Claire covered her face instantly. Marcus stared silently for several seconds, then unexpectedly burst out laughing. Real laughing. Claire looked betrayed. You too. I haven't seen you blush since college. I am not blushing. You absolutely are. Ethan looked deeply entertained now, which only made Claire more flustered. Marcus slowly calmed down afterward, then looked at Ethan carefully. She cares about this place because it's the last piece of her old life. Ethan nodded quietly. I know. Marcus looked surprised by that answer, then toward Claire. You trust him? Well, Claire froze slightly. Because she did, and that realization scared her deeply. Marcus sighed softly. The board meeting is Thursday. Claire straightened again immediately. They're trying to force another acquisition attempt. Hostile if necessary. Ethan's expression darkened. They can't legally take the garage. They can bury you in lawsuits until you can't afford to fight back. Silence filled the room. Because everyone knew that was true. Claire slowly looked toward the Pantera, then toward Edward Monroe's journals upstairs, then toward Ethan, and something inside her finally hardened in a different direction. Not emotionally cold. Protective. No, she said quietly. Marcus frowned. Claire knew. Her voice sharpened. They already took enough from this family. The room went still, because Claire Monroe almost never spoke emotionally in public. Yet now, she looked ready to fight for the garage with everything she had. Marcus studied her quietly, then finally sighed. God help those board members. Claire grabbed her coat calmly. Schedule the meeting. You already have one after this. Cancel it? Claire. I'm staying here today? Silence. Marcus blinked. At the garage. Yes. You skipped $1 billion investor lunch for this. The Claire looked around slowly. At Lily laughing beside the Camaro. At Amy making coffee upstairs. At Ethan covered in grease beneath the Mustang. At sunlight filling the workshop. At life. Warm. Messy. Real life. And for the first time in years, $1 billion lunch genuinely sounded less important. Yes, she answered quietly. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly smiled. Well, he muttered while heading toward the exit. About damn time. After he left, silence settled softly across the garage. Claire looked mildly horrified by her own decisions. I may have started a corporate war. Amy handed her coffee proudly. That's growth. Ethan laughed. Claire looked toward him carefully. And suddenly, for one terrifying, beautiful moment, she realized she didn't want to lose this place anymore. Not the garage. Not the healing. Not the strange little family forming inside these walls. And maybe, not Ethan either. The first sign of disaster arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ethan Carter discovered it while drinking terrible gas station coffee and reviewing invoices at the workbench. His bank account balance read $482,107. He stared at the number for a long moment, then sighed slowly. The garage restoration was bleeding money faster than expected. Roof repairs, electrical rewiring, replacement parts, paint materials, specialized tools, insurance. Every time Ethan solved one problem, 3 more appeared. And now, the reality he'd been avoiding finally arrived. He was running out of money. Fast. Daddy. Ethan quickly locked his phone before Lily walked over holding a half-eaten blueberry muffin. You made the sad face again. What sad face? The money one. Children noticed everything. Ethan forced a smile. I'm okay. That sounded fake. Very fake. Amy agreed while entering the garage carrying coffee. Ethan glared slightly. You're both emotionally hostile. We love you. Amy replied immediately. That's why. Lily climbed onto the workbench beside him. Are we losing the garage? The question hit harder than expected. Because honestly, Ethan didn't know anymore. He looked around slowly. Morning sunlight stretched across the workshop floor. The Mustang sat nearly rebuilt now. The Camaro's body restoration was halfway complete. And the Pantera finally looked alive again beneath fresh metallic primer. This place had become more than a project. It had become home. Not physically, emotionally. The garage healed them. All of them. And losing it now felt unbearable. No, Ethan said quietly. We're not losing it. Even if he wasn't fully sure. Amy noticed the lie immediately. Her expression softened. How bad? Ethan hesitated, then handed her the phone silently. Amy's eyes widened instantly. Oh, yeah. How much do you need? A lot. Specific. Probably 40,000 minimum to finish the restorations properly. Silence. That's aggressively bad. Correct. Lily looked confused. Can we sell cookies? Amy nearly choked laughing. Ethan smiled weakly. That might actually help at this point. Before anyone could continue, a black luxury SUV pulled into the lot outside. Claire. Ethan's chest reacted instantly now whenever she arrived, which was becoming a serious issue. Claire entered carrying folders and coffee while talking sharply on her phone. No. Delay the redevelopment vote. Pause. I don't care if the board's angry. Another pause. Then let them sue me. She hung up immediately afterward. Amy whispered dramatically, Oh, she's rich. Claire looked exhausted. Dark circles beneath her eyes. Tension in her shoulders. But the moment she saw the garage, something in her visibly softened. Then she noticed Ethan's expression. What happened? He tried smiling again. Failed. Claire immediately knew. Ethan. Amy quietly grabbed Lily. We're gonna go emotionally disappear upstairs. A smart woman. Claire walked closer, slowly. What's wrong? Ethan rubbed his forehead tiredly. The restorations are costing more than expected. How much? I'll figure it out. How much? He hesitated. Then answered honestly. 40,000. Claire blinked once. That's all? Ethan stared at her. All? Claire immediately realized how that sounded. Sorry. Billionaire perspective. That's slightly terrifying. She looked around the garage quietly. Then toward the Pantera. You could sell one car. I know. But? Ethan sighed heavily. But it feels wrong. Claire understood instantly. Because the garage wasn't about money anymore. It was about healing, purpose, memory, hope. Selling the cars unfinished would feel like abandoning something sacred. You're emotionally attached, Claire said softly. So are you. That silence again. Then Claire did something unexpected. I'll help. Ethan frowned immediately. Nope. Why? Because I'm not taking your money. Claire crossed her arms. You're aware I could accidentally spend 40,000 on lunch, right? That sentence physically hurt me. I'm serious. So am I. Ethan looked at her carefully. This place matters because we built it honestly. Claire's chest tightened slightly hearing we, and taking charity changes that. Yes? Claire stared at him for several seconds, then slowly nodded, because she understood pride too. Understood needing something to remain yours, even while struggling. Okay, she said quietly. We'll find another way. We again. Neither of them acknowledged it. Hours later, Ethan worked alone beneath the Pantera trying not to mentally calculate bankruptcy scenarios. The garage remained unusually quiet today. Claire sat upstairs handling Monroe Holdings' legal calls. Amy took Lily to school, and Ethan's thoughts became dangerously loud without distractions. He missed Emma hardest during moments like this, when life felt overwhelming. When responsibility became crushing. When fear sat heavy inside his chest, and there was nobody beside him at night anymore to say, "We'll figure it out." The memory hurt sharply. Ethan accidentally slammed a wrench harder than intended. Metal clanged loudly across the floor. "You okay?" Claire stood nearby, holding 2 coffees. He sighed. "Yeah." "No, you're not." He accepted the coffee quietly, then leaned against the Pantera. "I'm tired. Not physically. Emotionally." Claire understood immediately. She sat beside him on the concrete floor without speaking. No perfect advice. No motivational speech. Just presence. And somehow that helped more. After several quiet minutes, Claire spoke softly. "When Daniel died." Ethan looked toward her. "I spent almost 6 months unable to enter grocery stores." "What?" The Claire laughed weakly. "Sounds insane, right?" "No. Used to cook for me constantly." Her eyes drifted downward. "After he died, seeing couples shop together completely destroyed me." Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Because grief truly was strange like that. Tiny ordinary moments suddenly became unbearable. Claire looked toward him carefully. "You don't have to survive this alone." That line hit dangerously deep. Because somewhere along the way, Claire Monroe stopped feeling like an outsider visiting the garage. She started feeling like home inside it, and Ethan didn't know what to do with that realization. Suddenly, the garage doors burst open violently. Marcus Reynolds stormed inside looking furious. That board meeting was a disaster. Claire immediately stood. What happened? The investors found out about the Pantera. Silence. Marcus pointed toward the car dramatically. That thing alone could sell for nearly 2 million restored. Ethan blinked. What? The Claire looked equally stunned. Marcus continued pacing aggressively. Now the board is claiming Monroe Holdings intentionally undervalued the property sale. They knew the cars existed. Claire snapped. They're pretending they didn't. Can they reverse the contract? Ethan asked carefully. Marcus hesitated, then unfortunately answered honestly. Maybe. The room went still. No. Claire said instantly. Claire. No. Marcus looked exhausted. The board doesn't care about sentimentality anymore. They care about money. Amy entered downstairs at exactly the wrong time again. Why does every conversation here sound like a courtroom drama now? Nobody answered. Because the tension was too heavy. Lily slowly walked downstairs afterward holding a drawing. Then immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? Ethan crouched carefully beside her. Some people might try taking the garage away. Lily's face fell instantly. Numb. Claire's chest physically hurt seeing the panic in her eyes. The garage mattered to Lily too now. This building helped heal a grieving little girl after losing her mother. It wasn't just property anymore. It was sanctuary. We won't let that happen, Claire said firmly. Lily looked at her hopefully. Promise. Claire froze. Because promises terrified her. Everyone she loved eventually disappeared. Parents. Grandfather. Daniel. Promises felt dangerous after enough funerals. But then Lily held out the drawing silently. Claire took it carefully. It showed the garage beneath bright sunlight. The Pantera. The Mustang. Amy, Ethan, Lily, and Claire standing beside them. Above the drawing, Lily wrote Our Garage Family. Claire's throat tightened painfully. Family. Nobody had connected her to that word in years. She looked toward Ethan. Then toward the garage. Then back toward Lily. And something inside her shifted permanently. Yes. Claire whispered softly. I promise. Marcus watched her carefully. Then quietly understood something important. Claire Monroe wasn't fighting for the garage anymore because of old memories. She was fighting because she finally found something alive worth protecting again. That changed everything. Later that evening, rain tapped softly against the garage windows while Ethan locked up for the night. Claire still sat upstairs in Edward Monroe's office, reviewing legal documents beneath warm desk light. She looked exhausted. Beautifully exhausted. Ethan climbed upstairs quietly. You should go home. The Claire barely looked up. I'm working. It's midnight. I own a corporation. Time isn't real anymore. Ethan smiled softly, then noticed several legal folders spread across the desk. What's all this? Claire sighed heavily. The board filed an emergency injunction attempt. His stomach dropped instantly. They're serious. Yes. Can we win? Claire hesitated, then finally admitted, I don't know. That honesty hurt, because Claire Monroe usually sounded invincible. Seeing fear in her eyes changed everything. Ethan sat across from her quietly. For several minutes neither spoke. Rain continued falling softly outside. Then Ethan finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. Why are you fighting this hard for us? Claire looked up slowly, and for once, she answered without emotional armor. Because this place saved me once. Silence. And now, she continued softly, I think it's saving me again. Ethan's chest tightened painfully, because he felt the exact same way. Claire looked toward him carefully. Do you ever feel guilty? What for? For surviving. That question shattered him quietly. Because yes, every day, Ethan stared down at his wedding ring. Sometimes, he admitted. Claire nodded slowly. I used to think being happy again meant I loved Daniel less. Ethan looked toward her immediately. But grief doesn't work that way. The tears quietly filled Claire's eyes. I forgot that. Their eyes held. Longer this time. Deeper. No distractions. No jokes. Just two wounded people slowly realizing they understood each other in ways nobody else did. And for one terrifying, beautiful moment, Ethan almost kissed her. Claire felt it too. The air changed. The silence changed. Everything changed. Then suddenly, a loud crash exploded downstairs. Both jumped instantly. Ethan rushed downstairs first, then froze. The garage side window had been smashed open. Cold rain blew inside violently, and spray painted across the Pantera in giant red letters. PROPRTYOF Claire stopped cold behind him. Her face drained completely. Lily's drawing lay ruined beneath rainwater nearby. And for the first time since returning to the garage, Claire Monroe looked truly furious. The garage felt different after the vandalism. Quieter. Heavier. Like someone had broken more than just a window. Rainwater still stained the concrete floor the next morning while Ethan scrubbed red spray paint from the Pantera in tense silence. The words PROPRYOF had mostly faded now. But not completely. And somehow that made it worse, because the threat remained visible, real. Claire stood nearby holding a rag she hadn't actually used in 15 minutes. Her jaw remained tight. Eyes cold. Not emotionally frozen cold, angry cold. Which Ethan realized was far more dangerous. I should have seen this coming, she muttered. You're not responsible for psychopath executives. They wouldn't have targeted the garage if I hadn't fought the board publicly. Ethan looked toward her carefully. Claire, I brought this war here. No, he said firmly. They brought greed. Silence settled again. Lily quietly entered downstairs carrying another drawing. This one showed the Pantera with boxing gloves punching evil businessmen. Amy nearly cried laughing when she saw it. That is horrifyingly adorable. Lily handed the drawing to Claire. For emotional support. Claire stared at the paper for several seconds, then unexpectedly smiled. Tinied, but real. Thank you. Lily pointed dramatically toward the damaged side window. Can I throw rocks at the bad rich people? No. Ethan and Claire answered immediately. Amy thought about it. Maybe emotionally. Claire laughed despite herself. That sound softened the tension instantly. And Ethan realized something important then. The garage wasn't fragile anymore. not emotionally. Because despite threats, despite fear, despite everything trying to break them apart, people still laughed here. That mattered. A lot. Later that afternoon, Ethan finally returned to working on the Pantera restoration. If they wanted any chance of financial survival, the car needed to be completed soon. And honestly, he needed the distraction too. The garage remained mostly quiet while sunlight streamed through repaired windows overhead. Claire sat upstairs fighting Monroe, Holdings' legal fires over endless phone calls. Amy took Lily shopping. Leaving Ethan alone beneath the Pantera once again, he rolled beneath the car slowly with a flashlight clenched between his teeth. Transmission looked good. Suspension needed adjustments. Exhaust system still damaged. Then, his flashlight caught something strange. A welded metal compartment hidden inside the rear frame. Ethan frowned immediately. What the hell? He crawled further underneath. The compartment looked intentional. Not factory design. Handmade. His mechanic instincts sharpened instantly. Someone hid something here. Carefully, Ethan grabbed tools quickly. 20 minutes later, the metal panel finally came loose with a loud crack. A small oilcloth package slid into his hands. His pulse accelerated immediately. No way. He climbed out from beneath the Pantera carefully. The package felt old, heavy, protected deliberately. Ethan slowly unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside rested old property deeds, photographs, and a tiny brass key engraved with the Monroe family crest. Ethan blinked. What did you find? Claire's voice startled him instantly. She stood halfway down the stairs watching carefully. Ethan held up the package silently. Her expression changed immediately. What is that? No idea yet. They spread everything carefully across the workbench together. The property deeds looked ancient, nearly 40 years old. Claire frowned while examining signatures. These aren't Monroe Holdings records. What are they? Claire's eyes widened slightly. These properties belong to my grandmother. Silence. What? Claire quickly sorted through the documents. These addresses, she whispered softly. They're all community buildings. Old repair shops. Housing units, small businesses, a youth center. All hidden under private ownership outside Monroe Holdings. Ethan frowned. Why hide them? Claire slowly unfolded another document, then froze completely. What? She handed him the paper silently. Edward Monroe's signature sat across the bottom beside one sentence typed clearly beneath it. All properties transferred permanently into the Monroe Restoration Trust upon my death. Ethan looked up immediately. Your grandfather created a trust. Claire's breathing became uneven slightly. New. What? He created a foundation. Silence filled the garage. Claire looked stunned now. My grandmother grew up poor, she whispered. She believed businesses should rebuild communities instead of destroying them. Her eyes moved slowly across the hidden documents. These buildings were supposed to become free restoration workshops and housing programs. Ethan blinked. Then what happened? Claire laughed once bitterly. Corporate greed. That answer came too fast. Too painfully practiced. Claire grabbed another photograph, then froze again. Ethan stepped closer carefully. The photograph showed Edward Monroe standing beside several teenagers inside the garage decades earlier. Behind them hung a massive sign, Monroe Resto Ion Cozy Building Futures Together. Ethan stared silently. This place wasn't just a garage. No, Claire whispered. It was supposed to be a community program. Her hands trembled slightly now. My grandfather never told me this. More documents spilled across the table. Letters, financial plans, architectural sketches, and one final sealed envelope labeled FORTH Perso WHO FINDSTHE PANTRI. Ethan and Claire exchanged a look immediately. Well, that's aggressively mysterious, Ethan muttered. Claire slowly opened it. Inside rested one handwritten page. If you found this, then the garage survived long enough to choose the right people again. The Pantera was never the true treasure. People are. This garage was meant to become a second chance for those the world abandoned. Mechanics, single parents, lost kids, broken souls trying to rebuild their lives. Claire, if you're reading this, stop hiding from your heart. And to whoever stands beside her now, please, remind her she deserves happiness too. Edward Monroe. Silence swallowed the room completely. Claire stared at the letter with tears already forming. Ethan looked away slightly. Because somehow, Edward Monroe felt alive inside these walls still. Like the old man designed all of this years before it happened. Claire laughed weakly through tears. He was emotionally manipulative even from beyond the grave. Ethan smiled softly. Seems consistent. But Claire suddenly looked toward him, really looked, and Ethan realized with dangerous clarity they were standing exactly where Edward Monroe predicted they would. Together, inside the garage, trying to rebuild broken lives. That realization changed the air instantly. The silence between them became heavier now, more intimate. Claire lowered the letter slowly. My grandfather wanted this place to help people like us. Ethan nodded quietly. He knew broken people needed somewhere to heal. Claire's eyes filled further. I spent years turning Monroe Holdings into exactly the kind of company he hated. That's not fair. It's true. You survived. That word hit her hard, because nobody ever framed her ambition that way before. Survival. Not greed. Not coldness. Survival. Claire sat slowly on the edge of the workbench, looking emotionally overwhelmed. All these years, she whispered, I thought the garage represented everything I lost. Ethan leaned beside her quietly. And now? Claire looked around slowly. At the rebuilt workshop. At the Pantera. At sunlight filling the garage. At life returning here again. Now I think it represents what can still be saved. That line settled deep inside Ethan's chest, because he felt it too. Then suddenly, Lily burst downstairs dramatically holding grocery bags. We brought donuts. Amy stopped immediately, noticing the emotional atmosphere. Oh. Claire quickly wiped her eyes. Too late. Lily walked closer carefully. Are you crying? No. That sounded suspicious. Amy spotted the hidden documents instantly. What happened? Ethan handed her the photographs silently. Amy read everything slowly, then looked completely stunned. Wait. She looked around the garage dramatically. This place was supposed to become a community center. Claire nodded quietly. For struggling families and young mechanics. Amy looked toward Ethan slowly. Dude. What? This garage literally found you. Silence followed. Because somehow, that felt true. Ethan looked down at the old photographs again. Teenagers learning repairs. Families eating together. People smiling inside these exact walls decades earlier. Maybe Edward Monroe really believed places could heal people. And maybe he was right. Lily climbed onto the workbench excitedly. We should finish it. Claire blinked. Finish what? The dream. Children really did destroy emotional complexity with terrifying efficiency. Amy pointed dramatically. The tiny therapist has spoken. Lily grabbed the old photo of the Monroe Restoration House sign. We can make this again. Claire looked frozen, because suddenly, the future felt visible. Not just restored cars. Something bigger. A purpose. A legacy. A reason all of this happened. Ethan slowly looked toward her. What if we did? Claire's heart stumbled slightly. What? What if we actually rebuilt it? Silence. Dangerous, hopeful silence. A real restoration house. Ethan continued softly. Classes, community programs. Jobs for kids who need second chances. Amy immediately looked emotional. Oh my God. Claire stared at him speechlessly. Because for the first time in years, the future didn't look empty anymore. It looked warm, alive, possible. Then reality returned suddenly. Marcus Reynolds stormed into the garage looking pale. Problem. Everyone turned instantly. What now? Claire asked. Marcus looked directly toward the hidden documents on the table, then toward the Pantera, then toward Claire. The board found out Edward Monroe created the trust. Silence. Claire stood immediately. How? Someone leaked documents. What does that mean? Marcus inhaled heavily. It means Monroe Holdings could lose control of nearly half the redevelopment district. The room froze. And the board, Marcus added quietly, is officially declaring war. The war officially began on a Thursday morning. Claire Monroe walked into Monroe Holdings headquarters knowing half the board wanted her removed as CEO. And somehow, that thought bothered her less than the possibility of losing the garage. That realization alone should have terrified her. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor in complete silence. Employees avoided eye contact. Assistants stopped talking when she passed. Rumors already spread through the building. The billionaire CEO risking her empire over a condemned garage. Over one mechanic. Over feelings. Claire hated how accurate the rumors partially were. Marcus Reynolds caught up beside her carrying legal folders and enough caffeine to medically concerned doctors. You slept at all? No. Healthy. Don't start. Marcus sighed heavily while they walked. The board's furious. They're always furious. Not like this. Claire entered the massive boardroom without slowing down. 10 executives already waited inside. Cold faces. Expensive suits. People who measured human value through spreadsheets and profit margins. Claire used to fit perfectly among them. Now the room suddenly felt unbearable. Victor Hale sat at the far end of the table watching her carefully. 70 years old. Sharp-eyed. Predatory. One of Monroe Holdings' oldest investors. And the loudest voice demanding the garage property back. Claire, he said calmly. You're late. I was busy. With the mechanic. The room became instantly tense. Claire slowly took her seat. With protecting Monroe Holdings from illegal asset seizures. Victor smiled thinly. That garage belongs to the company. No. Claire replied coldly. It belongs to Ethan Carter legally and completely. Victor leaned forward slightly. You've grown emotionally compromised. Claire almost laughed. Emotionally compromised. As if caring about people was some corporate disease. You forged redevelopment contracts behind my back. She snapped. You hid my grandfather's trust. That trust threatens billions in expansion projects. It was his company. And now it's ours. That sentence hit Claire like physical violence. Because suddenly she saw the exact thing Edward Monroe feared most. A company that forgot humanity entirely. Victor slid several documents across the table. Sign these. Claire glanced downward. Transfer authorization papers. They wanted her approval to begin legal proceedings against Ethan. To bankrupt him. To bury him beneath lawsuits until he surrendered the garage willingly. Her stomach turned. No. Victor sighed tiredly. Claire. Numb. You're behaving irrationally? No? She said quietly. I'm finally behaving like my grandfather. Silence slammed across the room. Victor's expression hardened instantly. That garage has poisoned your judgment. Claire slowly looked around the boardroom. At marble walls. At million-dollar artwork. At executives who hadn't touched real struggle in decades. Then she remembered the garage. Lily laughing beside the Pantera. Amy making terrible coffee upstairs. Ethan rebuilding broken machines with patient hands. Warmth, humanity, life. And suddenly this room felt painfully empty. You know what my grandfather understood that all of you forgot? Claire asked softly. Nobody answered. He understood businesses exist to help people live better lives. Victor scoffed immediately. Knave. No. Claire replied. Human. Marcus quietly watched her with growing pride, because for the first time in years, Claire Monroe sounded alive instead of programmed. Victor stood slowly. You're choosing sentimentality over the company. Claire looked him directly in the eyes. I'm choosing people. That ended the meeting instantly. The board erupted into arguments. Threats, legal warnings, investor panic. But Claire barely heard any of it anymore. Because somewhere deep inside a decision already happened. Hours later, Ethan Carter sat inside the garage office staring at unpaid invoices while trying not to panic. The numbers looked brutal. Electricity bills, parts orders, insurance threats, lawyer fees. Even if they survived Monroe Holdings legally, the garage might still collapse financially. He rubbed his face tiredly, then looked toward the workshop below. Claire's grandfather's dream. The restoration house. The future they almost started believing in. Maybe he was stupid for hoping this could actually work. After Emma died, hope became dangerous. Because losing hopeful things hurt worse. Downstairs, Lily suddenly screamed excitedly. "Dad!" Dithan rushed downstairs instantly. What happened? Lily pointed dramatically toward the Pantera. It started. Ethan froze. Claire stood beside the car holding the ignition wire awkwardly while the Pantera engine rumbled unevenly for the first time in decades. Smoke puffed lightly upward. The engine coughed, shook violently, then roared alive. Everyone screamed immediately. Amy nearly threw coffee everywhere. Lily jumped in circles. Ethan stared in complete disbelief. You got it running. Claire looked equally shocked. I think accidentally. The Pantera engine growled loudly through the garage like some sleeping beast finally waking after years of silence. The sound filled the entire building. Powerful. Alive. Emotional somehow. Ethan laughed loudly. Real laughing. Then without thinking, he grabbed Claire around the waist and spun her once in excitement. Both froze immediately afterward, because suddenly they were very close. Very aware. Claire's hands rested against his shoulders. Ethan's arms still around her waist. The entire garage went silent except for the rumbling Pantera engine. Amy whispered dramatically, "Oh my God." Lily covered her own mouth excitedly. Neither Ethan nor Claire moved, because the moment felt dangerous. Beautifully dangerous. Claire's eyes lifted slowly toward his, and Ethan realized something terrifying. He wanted to kiss her. Badly. Not because she was beautiful, though she absolutely was. Not because she saved the garage. Not because grief connected them. But because somewhere along the way, Claire Monroe became the safest place his heart had found since Emma died. That realization shook him deeply. Claire felt it too. He saw it in her eyes instantly. The fear, the longing, the impossible tenderness, both of them spent months trying not to acknowledge. Then suddenly, her phone rang. The moment shattered immediately. Claire stepped back too quickly. Walls returning instantly. Reality returning. She answered sharply. What? Silence. Then her expression drained completely. I'll be there? She hung up slowly. What happened? Ethan asked carefully. Claire looked sick. The board called an emergency shareholder vote. Silence. For what? To remove me as CEO. Amy cursed loudly. Lily looked horrified. They can do that. Claire nodded once. If enough investors support it. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. All because of the garage. No. Claire whispered softly. All because I stopped becoming who they wanted. That line stayed with him. Because suddenly he realized something heartbreaking. Claire spent years transforming herself into the perfect corporate machine because grief convinced her emotions were weakness. And now, the garage was undoing that damage. Teaching her how to feel again, which threatened everyone benefiting from the colder version of her. Claire grabbed her coat quietly. I have to go. Ethan followed her toward the garage entrance. Rain fell softly outside again. Detroit looked gray and tired beneath evening skies. "You shouldn't fight them alone," he said quietly. Claire laughed weakly. "That's kind of how billionaires operate." "I'm serious." She turned toward him slowly, and for a brief moment, all the emotional armor disappeared again. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. That honesty nearly destroyed him. Because Claire Monroe never admitted fear. Not publicly, not privately. Yet here she was, looking at him like he mattered enough to tell the truth. Ethan stepped closer carefully. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think your grandfather would be unbelievably proud of you right now." Claire's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Ethan, you're fighting for people again." The tears slipped free silently, and this time, Claire didn't hide them. "I don't know how to lose another home," she whispered shakily. That sentence hit him hard. Because she wasn't talking about the company. She was talking about the garage. About them. About the strange little family growing inside those walls. Ethan gently touched her hand. Warm. Careful. Real. "You won't lose this place," he whispered. Claire looked at him like she desperately wanted to believe him. Then suddenly, without planning to, without thinking, Claire kissed him. Soft, brief, terrified, but real, completely real. The world stopped instantly. Rain faded away. Noise disappeared. There was only warmth. Only grief finally meeting healing halfway. Claire pulled back first, looking almost panicked by her own emotions. "I'm sorry." Ethan blinked once. "Please never apologize for that again." A tiny broken laugh escaped her. Then, before she could lose courage completely, Claire kissed him again, longer this time, gentler, like two lonely people slowly remembering they deserved tenderness after all. Upstairs, Amy slowly covered Lily's eyes. Adult moment. I already saw it. Traumatizing. They're in love. Amy looked downstairs toward Ethan and Claire standing beneath the rain-soaked garage lights. Then smiled softly. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think they finally are." But across the city, inside the towering glass offices of Monroe Holdings, Victor Hale stared coldly at legal documents spread across his desk, then slowly signed the removal authorization, and quietly prepared to destroy everything Claire Monroe loved. Everything changed after the kiss. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in small dangerous ways neither Ethan nor Claire knew how to control anymore. The garage felt warmer now. Closer. Every glance lasted too long. Every accidental touch carried electricity. And suddenly, two grieving people who spent years emotionally hiding from the world found themselves terrified of how much they wanted each other. 3 days after the kiss, Ethan stood beneath the Mustang pretending to focus on engine alignment while completely failing to ignore Claire Monroe, standing 10 feet away. She wore dark jeans again, hair loosely tied back, grays on her wrist, and every few minutes, he caught her smiling unconsciously, which somehow felt more intimate than the kiss itself. Amy noticed immediately. Of course she did. "You two are exhausting." Claire looked up from paperwork. "What?" "The longing." Ethan nearly dropped a wrench. "There is no longing." Amy pointed dramatically between them. "You kissed in the rain like emotionally damaged movie characters." Lily gasped excitedly. "You DD." Claire closed her eyes instantly. "Oh my God." Ethan muttered toward the engine, "I'm moving to another state." Amy looked deeply satisfied. "You're welcome." Claire tried focusing on legal documents again, failed immediately when Ethan laughed softly beside the Mustang. That sound ruined her concentration now, which felt deeply unfair. 3 months ago, Claire Monroe operated billion-dollar negotiations without emotional distraction. Now one mechanic smiling at her across a garage completely destabilized her nervous system. Pathetic. Dangerous. Wonderful. Marcus Reynolds entered the garage carrying several folders and immediately stopped. Oh. Claire narrowed her eyes suspiciously. What does that mean? You look happy. I hate all of you? Marcus smiled slightly. Good. Means you're healing? The word lingered quietly afterward. Healing, not weakness, not distraction. Healing. Claire still struggled believing she deserved that. Marcus laid the folders across the workbench. The shareholder vote happens Friday. Silence returned instantly. Reality. The threat never fully disappeared. Ethan slid out from beneath the Mustang slowly. What are the chances? Marcus hesitated, then answered honestly. Bad. Claire crossed her arms tightly. How bad? If Victor convinces enough investors, your compromising company profits emotionally. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Claire could lose everything. Her company, her position, her entire life's work. All because she chose the garage. Because she chose people. Because she chose feeling alive again instead of emotionally numb. Amy quietly looked toward Claire. Do you regret it? The entire garage became silent. Claire looked around slowly, at the rebuilt cars. At Lily drawing beside the Camaro. At sunlight pouring through repaired windows. At Ethan watching her carefully. And somehow, the answer came easily. Nuke. That honesty shook even her. Marcus nodded quietly. Then fight for it. Later that evening, rain tapped softly against the garage roof while Ethan and Claire worked alone on the Pantera. The garage smelled like warm metal and fresh paint. Comforting now. Home. Claire carefully handed Ethan tools while he adjusted the engine timing. You're staring again, he said softly. I'm supervising. You've been supervising my face for 5 minutes. Claire looked mildly offended. That sounded arrogant. You kissed me twice. Silence. Then unexpectedly, Claire laughed. Real laughter. God, Ethan loved hearing it now. Which was another terrifying realization. Claire leaned against the workbench beside him quietly. I forgot what this feels like. What? She looked toward the garage slowly. Wanting a future again. That sentence hit him directly in the chest. Because Ethan understood exactly what she meant. After Emma died, the future became something he survived instead of something he hoped for. Until this place. Until Claire. Until laughter returned. Ethan gently wiped grease from Claire's cheek with his thumb without thinking. Both froze instantly afterward. The touch felt painfully intimate. Claire's breath caught slightly. And suddenly the entire garage became too quiet. Too close. Ethan's hand lingered softly against her face. Claire. She looked at him like she wanted to stay in this moment forever. Then suddenly, the lights shut off. Complete darkness swallowed the garage instantly. Claire startled violently. What happened? Power outage probably. Thunder exploded outside immediately afterward. Storm. Perfect timing. Claire laughed weakly into the darkness. Apparently the universe hates emotional moments. Ethan grabbed a flashlight nearby. Warm yellow light filled the garage softly. And somehow, the darkness made everything feel more honest. More vulnerable. Rain hammered against the roof while lightning flashed through the windows. Claire looked toward the Pantera quietly. My grandfather loved storms. Why? He said they reminded people that survival could still feel beautiful. Ethan smiled softly. That sounds emotionally manipulative. Extremely. Another silence settled gently between them. Then Claire surprised herself by speaking again. After Daniel died, Ethan looked toward her immediately. I stopped touching people. The confession landed softly between them. What? The Claire stared downward. Hugs felt wrong. Holding hands felt wrong. Even casual affection. Her voice shook slightly. It felt like betrayal somehow. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Because grief twisted love into guilt sometimes. Claire looked up slowly. But when you touched my face just now, she swallowed once. It didn't hurt. That nearly destroyed him. Ethan stepped closer carefully. The flashlight glow flickered softly across the garage while thunder rolled outside. "You know what I think?" he whispered. "What?" "I think surviving grief doesn't mean you stop loving the people you lost." Claire's eyes immediately filled again. "I want to believe that. You already are." And before fear could interrupt them again, Ethan kissed her. Slowly, tenderly, not rushed, not desperate, just honest. Claire melted into him immediately, hands gripping his jacket softly. Years of loneliness cracking apart quietly between them. Outside, rain crashed against Detroit. Inside the garage, two broken hearts finally stopped pretending they didn't need each other. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Both jumped apart instantly. Amy stood frozen halfway down the stairs holding chips. "Should I moonwalk backwards?" Claire buried her face in her hands immediately. Ethan laughed helplessly. Amy pointed upward dramatically. "I saw a note he then whispered loudly, "Accept everything." Lily appeared behind her. Did they kiss again? Amy grabbed her instantly. "Children don't need details. I'm emotionally invested." Claire laughed so hard she nearly cried. And Ethan realized something beautiful then. The garage didn't feel haunted anymore. Not by grief, not by loss, not by memories. It felt alive. Hours later, after Amy and Lily finally went home, Claire sat alone upstairs in Edward Monroe's office reading another old journal entry while Ethan cleaned tools downstairs. The storm softened outside, lightning fading slowly across the city. Claire opened a random page quietly. September 14th. Claire told me today she's terrified of loving people because everyone she loves leaves eventually. I told her that's not a reason to stop loving. That's the reason to love harder while they're here. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Because suddenly, everything her grandfather tried teaching her made sense now. The garage. The restoration house. The community dream. It was never about cars. It was about people saving each other. Claire heard footsteps approaching softly. Ethan appeared in the doorway holding coffee. "You okay?" She handed him the journal silently. He read the entry carefully, then smiled sadly. He was smart. He was impossible. He'd like you and Lily together. Claire laughed weakly. "She's terrifyingly persuasive. She already asked if you're moving into the garage emotionally." Claire blinked. "Emotionally," she said, and I quote, "Miss Claire already lives here in her heart." Claire looked completely wrecked by that sentence. Because maybe Lily wasn't wrong. This place had become home emotionally. And Ethan felt dangerously close to home too. Claire stood slowly beside the office window overlooking the garage. The Pantera rested beneath soft lights. Almost finished now. Beautiful. Alive. Ethan stepped beside her quietly. Once the car's complete, Claire looked toward him carefully. "What?" "We entered the Detroit Heritage Auction." Her eyes widened slightly. "That's huge. If the Pantera wins," he exhaled slowly, "we save the garage financially. And if it doesn't?" Silence. Dangerous silence. Claire already knew the answer. Everything collapses. The garage. The restoration house dream. Maybe even Monroe Holdings itself. Ethan looked toward the Pantera below quietly. One shot. Claire slowly reached for his hand. Warm fingers intertwining gently with his. No fear this time. No hesitation. Just choice. Together. Then suddenly, Marcus called from downstairs. "Claire." Something in his voice sounded wrong. Both immediately headed down. Marcus stood near the garage entrance holding his phone with a pale expression. "What happened?" Claire asked instantly. Marcus looked at her carefully, then quietly said the words that shattered the room. "The board leaked your relationship with Ethan to the press." Silence. Absolute silence. Claire's blood ran cold instantly. Marcus handed her the phone. News headlines already spread everywhere. Billionaire, CEO risks company for mechanic boyfriend. Monroe Holdings, CEO under investigation for conflict of interest. Corporate, romance scandal threatens $1 billion redevelopment. Looked physically sick. They're trying to destroy you, Ethan whispered. No, Marcus corrected quietly. They're trying to force her to choose. Claire slowly looked around the garage, at the cars, at the dream they built, at Ethan standing beside her, and suddenly, she realized the terrifying truth. For the first time in her life, she genuinely didn't know which choice she would make. The internet destroyed Claire Monroe in less than 12 hours. By sunrise, every business outlet in America carried the story. Photos of Claire entering the garage. Photos of Ethan beside the Pantera. Headlines twisting love into scandal. Billionaire CEO in relationship with financial beneficiary. Corporate ethics disaster at Monroe Holdings. CEO risks investor billions for romance. Claire sat alone in her penthouse apartment staring blankly at television screens she forgot to turn off. The city stretched endlessly outside her windows. Cold, gray, distant. For years, this apartment represented success. Now it just felt empty. Her phone had not stopped ringing once. Investors, board members, lawyers, media requests, demands, and beneath all of it, fear. Not fear of losing Monroe Holdings. Fear of losing the garage. Fear of losing Ethan. Because suddenly, Victor Hale gave her the exact choice she always feared most. Love or survival. Claire rubbed her face tiredly, then noticed something strange. The apartment was silent, painfully silent. No music from the garage. No laughter from Lily. No terrible coffee from Amy. No Ethan downstairs fixing impossible things. And for the first time in years, Claire realized success meant absolutely nothing if you had nobody to come home to afterward. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus. She answered quietly. How bad? Silence first. Never a good sign. The board moved the shareholder vote to tonight. The Claire closed her eyes. They're accelerating. Yes. And Victor. He offered investors a replacement CEO already. That hurt less than expected. Because honestly, part of Claire already emotionally left Monroe Holdings weeks ago. The garage changed her too much. Marcus hesitated. There's more. Claire's stomach tightened. What? The Detroit Heritage Auction accepted the Pantera. Silence. What? They saw restoration photos online. They want the car featured as the headlining showcase vehicle tomorrow night. Claire stood instantly. That auction could save the garage. I know. Hope flickered painfully inside her chest again. Then Marcus spoke softer. But Ethan withdrew the entry. Everything stopped. What? He said he won't risk your career for money. Claire's heart physically hurt. Because of course Ethan would do that. Of course he'd sacrifice his own dream to protect her. And somehow, that made her love him more. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter stood alone inside the garage staring at the Pantera beneath warm overhead lights. Almost finished. Beautiful. Alive. 3 months of work sat inside every bolt, every repaired panel, every late night. And now, he might lose all of it anyway. Lily quietly walked downstairs carrying a blanket around her shoulders. You're doing the sad staring again. Ethan smiled weakly. Am I? Yes. She walked beside him carefully. Miss Claire cried on TV today. His chest tightened instantly. What? Amy entered downstairs carrying her phone. They cornered her leaving Monroe Holdings. She handed Ethan the screen silently. Claire stood surrounded by reporters. Flashbulbs exploding everywhere. Questions shouted aggressively. Are you abusing your position as CEO? Did you manipulate the property sale? Are you romantically involved with Ethan Carter? Claire looked exhausted. But then one reporter asked, was the garage worth destroying your reputation? And Claire answered quietly, yes. Ethan stared at the screen speechlessly. because she said it without hesitation, without fear, without shame. Lily looked upward thoughtfully. She loves you a lot. Amy smiled softly. Yeah. Ethan swallowed hard, because suddenly, the fear inside him shifted. This wasn't just about a garage anymore. Claire risked everything for this place, for him, and if he walked away now, then all her sacrifices meant nothing. His eyes slowly lifted toward the Pantera, then toward Edward Monroe's photograph upstairs, then toward Lily, then finally toward the old Monroe Restoration House sign leaning against the office wall. A future, a real one. Suddenly Ethan knew exactly what he had to do. Hours later, Claire entered the garage quietly just after sunset. She looked emotionally destroyed, hair messy, eyes red, corporate armor shattered completely. The moment Lily saw her, she sprinted forward and hugged her immediately. Claire nearly collapsed emotionally from that alone. Amy quietly took Lily upstairs afterward. Giving them space, Ethan approached carefully. You okay? Claire laughed weakly. That feels like a stupid question now. He gently touched her hand. Warm. Familiar. Home. Claire looked around the garage slowly. They froze my executive authority. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? The board voted temporarily pending investigation. Anger flashed through him instantly. They can't. They already did. Claire looked exhausted now, not physically. Soul deep exhausted. I'm so tired of fighting. That confession hurt badly, because Claire spent her entire life fighting, for survival, for control, for emotional distance. And now finally, she looked ready to collapse beneath the weight of it all. Ethan stepped closer slowly. Then stop. The Claire blinked. What? You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. Her eyes immediately filled again. God, this woman spent years believing love made people weak. Now tenderness alone nearly shattered her. Claire shook her head softly. You don't understand. Then explain it. Silence. Then finally, if I lose Monroe Holdings, she whispered, everything my grandfather built disappears. Ethan looked around the garage quietly. No. Claire frowned slightly. What? He built this. The garage, the dream, the restoration house, the people, not the corporate tower, not the billion-dollar meetings. This, warmth, community, hope. Claire stared at him silently, because somewhere deep down she knew he was right. Ethan gently took her face in his hands, and for once Claire didn't flinch from being loved. You know what your grandfather would say right now. She laughed weakly through tears. Probably something emotionally manipulative. Ethan smiled softly. Probably. Then quieter. He'd tell you people matter more than empires. That broke her completely. Claire cried silently against his chest while he held her beside the Pantera. And for the first time in her life, she stopped trying to be strong. Hours passed quietly afterward. The garage lights glowed warmly against the dark Detroit streets outside while rain drifted softly across the city. Finally, Ethan stood. I need to show you something. Claire looked confused but followed him upstairs into Edward Monroe's office. The old desk sat covered in restoration papers and trust documents. But now, one additional paper rested there. Auction registration confirmation. Claire blinked. You entered the Pantera. Ethan nodded once. You withdrew earlier. I changed my mind. Ethan. He looked directly at her. This garage deserves a chance. And if we lose. Silence. Then Ethan smiled softly. Then at least we lose fighting for something beautiful. That line hit her like sunlight after years of darkness. Because suddenly, Claire realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not truly. For years she feared losing people. Losing love. Losing safety. But the garage taught her something different. Some things were worth risking heartbreak for. Ethan moved toward the old office window overlooking the workshop. The Pantera gleamed below beneath soft lights. Finished now. Perfect. Alive. You know what scares me? He asked quietly. Claire stepped beside him. What? That I almost missed this. The garage. He looked toward her slowly. You. Silence. Dangerous, beautiful silence. Claire's breath caught slightly, because nobody ever chose her before. Not fully. Not without conditions. Not over money. Not over power. But Ethan Carter looked at her like she mattered more than all of it. And suddenly, the lonely, frightened girl inside Claire Monroe finally believed she deserved love again. She kissed him softly. No fear this time, no panic, just certainty. Downstairs, the Pantera rested silently beneath warm light. Upstairs, two broken people finally stopped running from happiness. Then suddenly, Marcus burst into the garage downstairs. CLAR. Both rushed downstairs immediately. Marcus stood breathless holding his phone. What happened? Claire asked instantly. Marcus looked stunned. The Heritage Auction just announced tomorrow's event is being nationally televised. Silence. Ethan blinked. What? Marcus slowly smiled for the first time in weeks. The entire country is about to see the Pantera. Hope exploded through the garage instantly. Because if the car succeeded tomorrow night, everything could change. The garage. The restoration house. Claire's future. All of it. Lily came flying downstairs immediately. Arabui, Waninenji. Amy followed behind her dramatically. Nobody knows but emotionally yes. Claire looked around the garage. At the people inside it. At the warmth. At the life. Then toward the Pantera waiting silently beneath the lights. And for the first time since her parents died, the future no longer terrified her. Because no matter what happened tomorrow, she finally understood something important. Home was never a building. Home was the people who stayed when life fell apart. And somehow, against all odds, she found hers inside a broken garage nobody wanted. The Detroit Heritage Auction looked nothing like the garage. Everything gleamed. Crystal chandeliers, luxury suits, million-dollar smiles, perfect polished wealth displayed beneath golden lights. And somehow, Claire Monroe had never felt more uncomfortable inside a room full of rich people. Because after months inside the garage, this world suddenly felt hollow, cold, artificial. Ethan stood beside the Pantera near the center showcase platform, adjusting his tie like it personally offended him. I look ridiculous. Claire smiled softly beside him. You clean up nicely. That sounded suspiciously billionaire. It absolutely was. The Pantera sat beneath spotlights glowing like a living piece of art. Metallic silver paint. Black racing stripes. Perfect restoration. Beautiful enough to stop conversations every time someone walked past. And yet, Ethan barely looked at the car. He kept looking at Claire. That still terrified him slightly, because somewhere between grief and grease and midnight conversations inside the garage, he fell in love with her completely. Claire noticed immediately. You're staring again. You're beautiful. Silence. Then Claire blinked, because Ethan said it so naturally. No games, no performance, just truth. Her chest hurt beautifully. Careful, she whispered softly. You'll emotionally heal me permanently. He smiled. Working on it? Across the room, reporters swarmed aggressively around investors discussing the Pantera. News cameras filled the auction floor. National broadcast screens displayed rotating images of the garage restoration journey. And, unexpectedly, people loved the story. Not the scandal. The hope. The single father rebuilding forgotten classics. The billionaire CEO rediscovering humanity. The dream of restoring the Monroe Restoration House. America became emotionally invested in the garage, which Victor Hale absolutely hated. Marcus Reynolds approached carrying champagne and legal folders somehow simultaneously. Good news. Claire looked immediately alert. That sentence scares me now. Marcus grinned slightly. Public support shifted heavily toward you after the trust documents leaked. What? Turns out people prefer community restoration projects over billionaire redevelopment plans. Amy appeared nearby dramatically. Humanity survives. Lily spun excitedly beside the Pantera in a tiny dress and combat boots. WERFIEMA US. Ethan looked horrified. Oh no. Claire laughed softly. God, that sound still wrecked him. Marcus lowered his voice slightly afterward. There's more. Claire's expression sharpened. What? The board's emergency vote failed. Silence. What? Victor lost investor support after journalists uncovered the redevelopment corruption. Hope exploded through Claire instantly. So Monroe Holdings. Still yours. Claire physically staggered slightly, because after weeks of emotional warfare, she finally won. Not by becoming colder, not by becoming ruthless, but by becoming human again. Marcus smiled softly, watching realization hit her. Your grandfather would be proud. The Claire's eyes filled immediately. She looked toward the Pantera, toward Ethan, toward the strange little family standing together beneath auction lights. And for the first time in years, victory actually felt meaningful. Then suddenly, the auctioneer's voice echoed across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's featured restoration showcase. The spotlights shifted dramatically toward the Pantera. The room quieted instantly. Ethan inhaled slowly. Claire squeezed his hand gently. Warm, steady. Home. The auctioneer continued. A 1972 Di Tommaso Pantera restored through the newly revived Monroe Restoration Project. A massive screens displayed photographs from the garage. Lily painting signs. Amy drinking coffee beside engines. Claire covered in grease laughing beside Ethan. The entire room watched silently. Then the final image appeared. Edward Monroe's old photograph beside the original Monroe Restoration House sign. The auctioneer smiled softly. This vehicle represents more than automotive restoration. He looked toward Ethan and Claire. It represents second chances. Silence settled across the ballroom. Emotional silence. Then bidding started. 500,000. 700,000. 1 million. Ethan nearly stopped breathing. Claire squeezed his hand harder. The numbers climbed rapidly. Investors, collectors, museums, private bidders from around the world. The Pantera became a symbol now. A story. Hope attached value to the car beyond metal and paint. 1.8 million. 2 million. The room erupted softly. Amy whispered dramatically. I am going to faint emotionally. Lily looked upward proudly. Miss Claire's sad race car became rich. Ethan laughed helplessly. Then suddenly, one final bid echoed through the ballroom. $3 million. The room exploded. Gasps. Applause. Shock. The auctioneer nearly dropped his card. $3 million. Do I hear higher? Silence. Nobody moved. The hammer slammed downward. So LD. The ballroom erupted completely. Applause thundered across the room. Cameras flashed everywhere, and Ethan Carter stood frozen beside Claire Monroe while the impossible finally became real. $3 million. Enough to save the garage. Enough to build the restoration house. Enough to change everything. Lily screamed loud enough to concern nearby billionaires. WEDDI2. Amy cried immediately. Marcus looked deeply emotionally exhausted. Claire stared at Ethan speechlessly, and suddenly, he laughed. Not polite laughing. Not restrained. Real joyful laughter. The kind grief stole from him years ago. Claire's eyes filled instantly hearing it. Because that sound meant more than the money ever could. He was alive again. Completely alive. Ethan turned toward her slowly, and in front of the entire ballroom, he kissed her. No hesitation this time. No fear. Just love. The crowd actually applauded louder afterward. Amy pointed dramatically. IKNEUIT. Lily looked deeply satisfied. Adults are slow. The hours later. The auction finally ended beneath glittering city lights while reporters flooded around Ethan and Claire asking questions. One journalist called out, "What happens to the garage now?" Ethan looked toward Claire, then smiled softly. "We finish what Edward Monroe started." Claire's chest tightened beautifully hearing "we" again. Another reporter asked, "What does that mean exactly?" Claire answered this time, "It means the Monroe Restoration House officially opens this fall." Gasps spread instantly. Cameras flashed wildly. Claire continued calmly, "Free restoration training programs, housing assistance, mentorship for struggling families and young mechanics." Ethan looked at her proudly. Because this wasn't corporate Claire speaking anymore. This was the woman Edward Monroe always believed she could become. Warm, brave, human. One final reporter asked quietly, "And what made you fight this hard for the garage?" The Claire looked toward Ethan, then toward Lily asleep against Amy's shoulder nearby, then toward the photographs from the garage displayed across the ballroom. Finally, she smiled softly. "Because broken things deserve another chance." That quote appeared across national headlines the next morning. But the truly important moment happened later. Much later. After the cameras disappeared. After the reporters left. After the city finally became quiet again. The garage stood peaceful beneath soft autumn night air while warm lights glowed through the windows. Home. Ethan unlocked the doors slowly, then stopped. Claire stood silently beside him staring inside. The garage looked beautiful now. Restored floors, bright lighting, fresh paint, music playing softly through speakers, and hanging above the workshop, a newly restored sign Muaries Cardiar Restiare Resi. Claire covered her mouth instantly. "What did you do?" Ethan smiled nervously. "Used part of the auction money. You named it after me. You rebuilt it with me." Her eyes filled immediately. Again, always him making her emotional now. Claire walked slowly through the garage, touching everything softly. The sign, the workbenches, the restored office upstairs, and finally she noticed one last thing near the Pantera. A tiny framed photograph. Edward Monroe, Daniel, young Claire, and beside it a new photo, Ethan, Lily, Amy, Marcus, and Claire herself standing together inside the garage laughing. Past and present, loss and healing, all connected. Claire cried quietly then, not from sadness, from relief. Because after years of surviving, she finally found somewhere she belonged again. Ethan stepped beside her carefully. "You okay?" Claire laughed softly through tears. "No." He blinked slightly. "No? I'm happy." The word sounded almost unfamiliar coming from her, like a language she forgot years ago. Ethan gently wrapped his arms around her from behind while both stared at the garage. Warm light, quiet music, peace, and somewhere above them, it almost felt like Edward Monroe finally stopped worrying. Lily suddenly burst through the entrance dramatically holding donuts. "I brought victory snacks." Amy followed behind her. "You left your Billionaire shoes at the auction." Claire looked downward, bare feet, grease-stained jeans, Ethan's oversized hoodie. She laughed loudly. "I did." Amy grinned. "Look at that." "What?" "You finally chose happiness over performance." Silence settled softly afterward. Beautiful silence. Then Lily climbed onto a stool dramatically. "Can we fix another sad car tomorrow?" Everyone laughed. Even Marcus. And while laughter echoed through the garage once more, Claire Monroe finally understood the truth her grandfather tried teaching her all along. Broken things were never hopeless. Sometimes, they just needed someone willing to love them long enough to rebuild them.